We have that it is 3:00. And so I will call the Monday, October 17th, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting to order. For the record, both members are present, as is planning official and planner Hanna Veal and Betty Gum. There are some changes to the agenda that I might suggest. The first of which, well, subdivision fiscal year 2022, number 5, as well as subdivision fiscal year 2022, number 7, have both requested by the applicant to be moved to November 7th, which could be done on the consent agenda. And then when we get to the consent agenda, on the September 19th, 2022 minutes, I did note that there might be a couple of changes for the committee to consider. And they're both related to the design review fiscal year 2022, number 14. Where it was noted in discussion related to 22 parking spaces and walking as an alternative. I might suggest that I don't recall that the committee ever specifically identified the exact number, if it was 22 or 11. So just strike that 22 spaces, as well as not noting walking as an alternative transportation that's not otherwise noted in code, and that it's inherent in all applications.
Actually, the links to those minutes, I was unable to pull anything up from those. It says verify it hasn't been moved or something. I'm not.
On that, we can certainly continue the minutes until the next meeting.
They were on the website.
And as Ms. Beals noted, they are on the website as well, if you'd prefer to go that route right now. And the direction there would be in departments, city clerk, agenda and minutes, design review minutes.
Now, Jenna, what was the section that you were talking about changing on the minutes?
It was on September 19th, 2022. Discussion related and attributed to you on design review fiscal year 2022, number 14, the Sonder application. And it noted,
okay, I see it.
Specified a deficiency of 22 parking spaces. And I'm suggesting just leaving it deficiency of parking.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then that walking wouldn't be considered an alternative mode of transportation for implementation of code, and that walking is something that's inherent to all applications.
Yeah, I agree with those changes.
Me too.
Thank you.
So it's the minutes for these two hearings and then agenda changes on the consent agenda, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, move to approve these 2 minutes and the changes that you've previously mentioned.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And then moving on to our public hearings. The first item is design review fiscal year 2022, number 15. Jorre Delgado is requesting a new multifamily construction project located at 3941 Reed Street. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Delgado.
Hi, everyone. Are you able to hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Jorre Delgado. I'm here to represent the Arabella Lofts located at 3941 Reed Street in Garden City, Idaho. To keep this brief, because we have talked about this project a couple times, things that we have addressed since the last design review hearing are the pathway that was asked to be provided throughout the subdivision. We have provided that all the way through the subdivision, as well as we have addressed the front facade of the front building facing Reed Street. And we also, from the last meeting to now, we've also discovered that there's a possible connection point in the back that could help our back parking spaces that were an initial discussion where there was an issue where we were thinking that they might be a little bit too difficult to back out of, but there is currently now a possibility to connect to a future development that is starting the process with Garden City next to us. So we have been working with them. Nothing is finalized and we are farther along in the process than them. So we can't say that this is a 100% for sure thing, but we have worked with a couple of their teammates and kind of overlaid our subdivisions to show that they could and they almost do lay out perfectly. So that's just one thing I wanted to note in here. But going back to some of the corrections that were made, the front facade of the building facing facing Reed Street, we have added the logo as well as the apartment names or the development name. It does appear to be a little small in the renderings, but as they're actually constructed, they will appear a lot larger on the building. And then we did add the awning over the entrance to the front, as well as some bike racks and the pathway, as well as the pathway that rolls all the way through the subdivision. It does, in this rendering, it kind of looks like the cars are kind of in the pathway walkway area, but the cars will actually be pulled all the way into the drive or garageway. They're just pulled a little bit back because we were trying to show that there is a garage in that area. But the pathway has been provided all the way through the subdivision and to the back entrance of the back building. And then lastly, it was requested that we show some renderings of the middle parking space, the island, little landscape island that we have. So I provided a couple of those just to show some of the landscaping. We didn't do as much landscaping in this area now, knowing that there could potentially be a connection with that neighborhood or the development next to us. But this is currently what we have envisioned for this space, just so that when you're looking down, you're seeing landscaping and not so much of a car. And those are the corrections that I have from our last design review.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Delgado? All right, seeing none, I'll turn it over to Ms. Veal for a staff report.
Good afternoon. I'll also keep my discussion a little bit sweet and to the point. There were new documents submitted on October 5th, 2022. In an attempt to resolve the outstanding code compliance issues and comments made by both the committee and the design review pre-application staff report. The application does, however, remain to be non-compliant by not providing adequate common open spaces or the required street tree quantity or species. There are remaining discussions left to be had that include the front facade of that unit facing Reed Street, the perimeter landscaping, and the vehicular circulation and functionality, as well as that pedestrian connection through the common drive location. Getting into code, we look at 8-4I-4. So the site is providing 13,344 square feet of landscaping. The site is 13,344 square feet, and the landscaping provided per the plans is about 2,980 square feet. So that's about 22% of the site. Most of the landscaping, however, is provided along the landscape buffer or setback areas. And per code, these areas cannot count towards the minimum landscaping requirement of 5%. So in identifying these, as Jorre is showing on the screen right now, the green areas, most of it's in the setback, so it's showing non-compliance with this section of code. Additionally, the site appears to be deficient at least one street tree. The tree proposed is a spring snow crab apple, which is not necessarily a qualifying or viable street tree, as the intent of a street tree is to provide high and wide branching canopy to allow for shade and environmental benefits. It's likely that due to the space or the size constraints of this site, that the clear vision triangle is the one impeding the ability to propose those street trees to meet code compliance. So in such cases where ACHD is not permitting a street tree to be within that clear vision triangle, we've had the design review committee determine where the location of the street tree would be appropriate. It could be a requirement to provide a sidewalk on site with a sidewalk easement. It could be that the sidewalk can still be located within the right of way, or ACHD's right of way, and then using that 20-foot frontage zone per the 8-4I-4 code standards. The street trees can be in that 20-foot frontage zone. Staff has conditioned in the decision document, it would be condition number 9, that the project needs to provide at least 2 class 2 or 3 street trees along that Reed Street frontage. But if in conflict with the clear vision triangle, the application is permitted to provide the required street trees back of sidewalk within the 20-foot frontage zone, so long as they meet the intent of street trees. And then additionally, the coordination with development services staff is required prior to construction. I would also like to note that this landscape buffer zone per ACHD's preliminary agency comment is going to be required to be 8 feet wide, not the 6 feet that we sometimes bounce back and forth between. Additionally, so we can get into the open space provision. So 8-4L5 open space standards for multifamily developments. The balconies proposed for each unit do not provide adequate square footage to meet the required private open space square footages. However, the site does plan to provide private gardens for each unit that are deficient in that private open space. And it is shown on the site plans. So the submitted documents on October 5th show, I'm getting ahead of myself, sorry. Yeah, so we do have enough private open space through those private balconies and the community gardens. And then we get onto the discussion of the common open space, which appears to be lacking. The new plan submitted on October 5th, 2022 show common open space. However, the calculation isn't compliant in that the common open space does have dimensional requirements. Common open space cannot be less than 400 square feet in size with a dimensional standard of 20 by 20. And the plans that were submitted on October 5th show smaller dimensions for that common open space. It was conditioned in the staff report to require code compliant common open space, so that the open space needs to meet those dimensional standards. But in looking at the current site plan as proposed, staff has concerns with the rearrangement of common open space to where it might actually trigger coming back to the design review because the site plan has changed so much to reach that code compliance. And then I would just also like to know, it wasn't involved in the staff report or wasn't included in the staff report, but it was included as part of the packet. And Jorre, also the applicant, mentioned coordination with that adjacent property owner. That adjacent property is considering a multifamily development. Nothing is solidified yet. It's just been in conversation with staff, and staff has reached out to both the applicant of this application and that future application of the adjacent property to try and coordinate some kind of at least vehicular connection, which Jorre also spoke to today. Staff included a Word document converted to PDF, and it just shows to highlight the surrounding properties that are currently at least in construction or entitlement off of Reed Street. So we're seeing a lot of construction going on in Reed Street, and it's just a way to show the committee as well as the public how that neighborhood is changing in the last year or two. And with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions by the committee for Ms. Veal?
Hanna, how much green space are they deficient percentage wise?
So I'm not exactly sure how much they're deficient. Because the landscaping just ended up showing the total landscaping. They didn't really section off what
Oh, they
section
didn't,
or
yeah.
some certain amount of square footage. But you can look at what is on the screen right now, and any area around the perimeter of the property. So north, south, east, west.
sure.
Those look all like setbacks, and setbacks are landscaping within setbacks are not permitted to count towards that landscaping requirement. So we're dealing with a very minimal.
Even those garden beds that are on the back, right?
Right. And code isn't exactly super specific about if garden beds can count towards landscaping or if they cannot, but those garden beds are counting towards the private open space square footage requirements.
And can private open space square footage requirements be in the setback?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
So it checks that box, but not the other box. Got it.
Okay.
All right. Not seeing further questions. So with that, I'll open it up for open the public testimony portion of the public hearing. Is there anyone in person who wishes to testify on this matter? All right, seeing none. Is there anyone on Zoom who wishes to testify? If so, either utilize the raise your hand feature, or there are few enough people that you could go ahead and speak up. All right, seeing none. I'll turn it back over to Ms. Delgado for any rebuttals that she'd like to provide.
I have none. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the committee members for discussion.
Yes, I can lead in with some thoughts that I have. I think that we're just taken from the front of the site. I think we're still lacking significantly on how that front unit really addresses the street. In my mind, it doesn't do much more than it was doing the last time we were here, just with a logo. And it's actually, when I look at that, it makes me even feel like with this, the subdivision, name and identity over the top of this unit, that's some kind of entrance into this multifamily building, or, just something. It gives me the wrong impression of what I think that needs to do, being a residential unit. So that's one item that I've got concerns with. The other one is this sidewalk connection. I don't see how it terminates into the sidewalk at the front of the development. It looks like there's landscaping that impedes somebody from accessing that. It also does not access the end unit. I think it kind of stops short of getting all the way back to where those garden beds are because of the parking at the very end of the so it's something right there. It's disconnected.
There's a sidewalk right there behind that car.
Well, is that the sidewalk or is that the rolled curb element? It was very difficult to understand from your from the civil drawings, and the landscape drawings were indicating this larger rolled curb and then sidewalk. So it's not clear to me of where the sidewalk is and what's curb.
Yeah, so this pad of concrete actually comes out farther past this. Just the car kind of in this rendering is in the way. I could probably get a better rendering to show for that. I just don't have one right now. I could probably ask for a rendering that removes this car so that you can see that pad comes all the way out.
So what is that little bump out on the rear there? Is that somebody's access?
So this is a mechanical room in the riser room.
Okay. Okay, so it actually it doesn't reach all the way to the garden is what it looked like. But anyways, I just kind of making sure that whatever kind of connection spine is there actually goes the full way into the development.
Yeah, this does connect, and that is just the riser room and mechanical area.
And so then moving on to another issue I have is with those dysfunctional parking stalls at the end of this terminus view that we have down that drive aisle. That's probably another area that I'm a little concerned with, that it really works. And then, of course, complying with the green space. Yeah, those were kind of my initial thoughts.
Yep, and you hit all the big ones. My impression of the front elevation was the same as yours, and that it's kind of, it almost took a step in another direction of now it looks commercial in essence, but it is missing. It's still missing the street front engagement. There's no windows on the street front. It's just a blank door that goes to, basically a stairwell. There's no eyes on the street in essence. So that end unit needs to be an end unit and engage with the street. And then all the other comments as well. I read it the same way, Brett, that it looks like that sidewalk ends at the door to the last unit. And to me, it was like, okay, it's getting where it needs to go. It doesn't need to go beyond the the sidewalk doesn't need to go in front of the last garage because we've gotten to the front door, but you mentioning the community gardens and stuff, I think that does need to extend beyond. And it does read in the landscape plan from Stack Rock Group, it does read like that sidewalk ends short of getting all the way down to the bed. So I think that needs to be addressed. The landscaping around that, the parking island that's kind of dead center of the site, I think the landscaping around there is now satisfying the terminal view that used to just look at that car sitting in that parking spot. So I think that satisfies that. I agree there's some difficulty with the end parking stalls. It sounds like there may be an opportunity for some sort of connection next door or some sort of space sharing next door to alleviate some of that difficulty, but obviously we'll need to see that. Street trees cleanup and the common open space cleanup seems like there's some work to do there for it to be something that we can see and have approved rather than have it so deeply conditioned that it gets overlooked down the road come inspection time.
Yeah, I'll just throw another comment on that little bulb out landscaping. To me, it didn't look like there was much more than some low grasses and very kind of like low shrubs there. So I still think that you're going to see a car, the front of the car with some low shrubs and grasses in front of it, and not really much to dress up that view. I mean, maybe it needs a screening element, like decorative fence screening, some kind of an element too, if it's just going to have some low vegetation.
An art piece or a screen and
Something,
vegetation around it to soften that. Yeah.
it's the right idea, but I think it's too minimalistic to achieve what we were looking for in creating something. As you're looking down there, something.
Yeah, because that's not only the terminus view hiding that car or attempting to hide that car, but also the two cars that are all the way down at the end.
Correct. So I think those are the big items. And I don't know whether we discussed this before, but is trash pickup? I think we touched on that, on what was going on with the trash collection, and maybe it's just outside each garage.
So
don't
trash
know.
collection is actually going to be along Reed Street, the same as Violet's Crossing was approved to do.
With toters.
Yes.
All right, I'm hearing that perhaps,
Oh, one more thing, Jenna, before you start, another comment I had. The bike parking right in front of the front entrance of the on-street unit might need some thought.
it's sounding like there is going to be a request to have this application come back with these items. Unless the committee members redirect me and say that they think that these can be conditioned. In future conditions, I might note that there could be a condition that addresses the fact that there's still negotiation with the adjacent property. So something along the lines that should cross connection be provided, that a cross access easement is provided to the adjacent property, so that that could be memorialized. And then just a comment from me on the trees. especially the ones that like the Franz Fontaine towards the rear. Certainly they're acceptable, but it would be nice to see like a monument tree within the site and bring some of the softness that a large tree could bring. But also want to acknowledge the applicant for endeavoring to work with the neighbors to connect the project to the adjacent projects. Any other comments from the committee member?
No,
Our-
not I.
Our next date is November, no, it's not, excuse me. It's the November 7th meeting. Does the applicant feel that there's enough time if we continue this to a date certain of November 7th?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, I move to continue this application to a date certain of November 7th to give the applicant time to respond to the comments from this hearing.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Right. Yeah, thank you, everyone. And
Thank you.
thank you. On to the next item. Subdivision fiscal year 2022, number 4, Ellis Estates. An application for a combined preliminary final plat processed as a planned unit development. Aria Orr is our applicant today. And it will be, the proposal is a 14 residential lot subdivision at 4800 North Adams. And with that, I pass it over to Aria.
Hello, and thank you for your time today to hear our application. This project is titled Ellis Estates Subdivision and is located at 4800 North Adams Street. This project consists of 2 separate townhome buildings on the site. There will be 2 7-plexes for a total of 14 townhome units. Each of these units will be subdivided on their own lot. There is a mixture of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units, with each unit being 3 stories. There is a ground floor private 2-car garage for each unit, as well as a rooftop patio. Our current setbacks are as follows. We have a front setback off of 48th Street of 11 foot 4 inches roughly, and a front setback off of Adams Street of 19 feet. The interior side setback, we are requesting a waiver for 0 feet to allow for a common drive aisle to access each of the garages for each unit, as well as to construct a retaining wall along the north, east, and northwest property boundaries. And then we have a rear setback of 22 foot 5 to the building to the northwest of the property. And then we do have a 15-foot setback to the sidewalk along that property as well.
Miss Orr, excuse me. I know we do know that you had a presentation and don't know if you're intending to share that or if so, we're not seeing it.
Oh, sorry, I am traveling today, and so
I
It's-
can also pull it up and try and stay along with what you're saying.
yes, Hannah, that would be really helpful.
That makes it easier.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Give me 1 second. So we talked floor plans. Are we on exterior elevations?
Yes.
Okay.
So our exterior elevations, as I said before, this would be 3 stories. And so we would be looking at doing a mixture of fiber cement board, wood siding, and metal siding for the exterior elevation. On this slide, we are showing the facades The one on the right would be the elevations facing 48th Street, as well as facing the rear or the rear property line to the northwest. And then we would be looking at doing fiber cement colors and a combination of Midnight Lake and White House, which is the blue and the white shown. And then the wood siding would be in the color Havana Gold, and metal siding in the color Brownstone. Hannah, if you move to the next slide, these are just elevations showing in between the townhome units, kind of along that common drive aisle, where each unit can access their garages. And it would be the same colors and materials that we would be using on those elevations as well. And then moving on to the next slide, kind of already as discussed, we would be required to have 28 enclosed spaces, and we would be providing 28, which would be 2 stalls per unit. And then again, each unit would have their own private access to each of those enclosed spaces. We would be required to have 7 guest spaces, and we are requesting a waiver to reduce that to 4 spaces with the constraints of the storm drainage that's required on the site, as well as common open space. We can fit 3 off-street spaces as well as 1 on-street space, giving us a total of 4, hence the request for the waiver on parking. Moving on to the next slide. With the 5% site minimum for landscaping, we currently have a required amount of 1,376 square feet, and we are providing 3,600 square feet of landscape. And that includes 209 shrubs and bushes, as well as 15 trees, which does exceed the minimum requirements for the site. Moving to the next slide. We are proposing a retaining wall to the northwest and northeast boundaries, and that is to enclose that storm drainage area, as well as just the buildup of the site, because we are in the floodplain. And so we would be proposing a roughly 4-foot high retaining wall. And then due to building code requirements, we would also be required to have some sort of guide or guardrail along that for safety measures. And that would be in the form of either a railing or a fence, which is yet to be determined. And then that would end up being roughly 5 feet from the building, and then 15 feet from that northwestern property line. And then as it moves along to the north and to the east, it would get smaller and get closer to the property line. And then moving on to open space, we have a required 2,753 square foot minimum open space requirement. Currently, we are providing 2 forms of open space for this project, one being a pedestrian path along the north that's accessing those units, and then also separating the units from that 15-foot setback. And then this path is proposed to be 5 foot in width and exceeds the minimum pedestrian pathway requirement of 80 feet, as we are providing roughly 140 feet of pathway. Our second form of open space would come through an open grassy area along the front facing Adams Street, which would be roughly 1,400 square feet of open space. We are providing a total of 2,500 square feet of open space, which does not meet that minimum. We are also requesting top patios also be counted towards the open space, as each unit does have that private access to their each rooftop space. And then moving on to the next slide, this is just showing where we have those open spaces located on the property. And that is the project that we are presenting, and I stand for any questions.
Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Orr?
5201.
All right.
I don't have any right now.
Nothing. right now
Okay,
for me.
thank you. And then I'll turn it over to Ms. Veal for a staff report.
Okay, good afternoon. This is an application called sub fee 2022-0004. It is a subdivision application located in the R3 zoning district, the Main Street corridor, and the mixed use commercial future land use designation of the comprehensive plan. The subdivision application is also to be processed as a planned unit development application. As a planned unit development, the applicant can submit waivers to code standards. However, in the initial submittal, they had only formally requested one. Since then, staff has been able to analyze the submittal packet and has drafted, I believe it's 6 different waiver requests, and I will list them here. The first is a waiver to setbacks. So they are asking for a 0-foot side setback and a 5-foot rear setback. There are also is a waiver to allow for more than 4 dwelling units being served off of a common drive, allowing for the 14 units to be served off that common drive. They are also asking for a guest parking space waiver, allowing for only 3 guest parking spaces as opposed to the 7. And then they're also asking for a parking stall dimensional standard waiver, allowing for 9-foot by 18-foot parking stalls. Code requires a 10 by 20. The 5th waiver is a common open space waiver requirement, allowing for the private rooftop patios to count towards common open space requirements. And then there is another waiver, the last one being mentioned as a waiver to perimeter landscaping, allowing for none of the required perimeter landscaping to be on site. A section of planned unit development code requires that the development that which proposes 10 or more dwelling units shall provide a variety of housing types. This proposed the proposed variety shall include attached units, so townhomes and duplexes, detached units like patio homes, and single family and or multifamily units. Provided that the overall density limit of the district is maintained. So this application does not propose a variety of housing types, and that all of the units are 3-story townhomes of similar architectural design. The townhomes, while appearing similar in exterior elevations, do provide a variety of 2- and 3-bedroom floor plans. And there has been an ongoing discussion regarding an access easement between this property and the adjacent property. Original subdivision plans show that the subdivision was to construct over this access easement located along the northwestern property boundary line. However, the new plans do show accommodation of this access easement. But it is staff's understanding that there's ongoing discussion and the legitimacy of the easement is still in question. But as such, staff has drafted a condition of approval for the resolution of this easement prior to the signing of the final plat. And this would be a resolution that both parties, the subdivision applicant and the adjacent property owner, come to a formalized understanding and agreement, and that being the same understanding. So staff would recommend that the condition to find, or staff would recommend that the condition of this resolution to figure out the legitimacy of this easement, instead of it being prior to signing of the final plat, it gets moved to prior to construction. And I believe that would be just simply moving that condition. I need to find it. Number 2, under prior to city signature of plat. So diving into code, we can start with Garden City Code 84B3, single family and two family attached and detached dwelling units. So this development proposes 3-story townhome units organized into 2 7-plex buildings. Each townhome structure consists of 2 different floor plan layouts with a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom floor plans. Each dwelling unit consists of a 2-car garage and a rooftop patio. The 3rd bedroom on the ground floor does have smaller dimensions, so the space can act as more of an office space than a bedroom. The end units closest to Adams Street do not address the street. This is not code compliant because the side elevations do not adequately address the street. Code requires that these elevations that which face public streets, so Adams and any other, I believe it's 48th street, shall contain windows, modulation, and direct and permanent pathway as a sidewalk to the primary entrance. Also, the front door is required to have more of a front entry, so it could be a porch, a stoop with decorative posts or at least a roof above that primary entrance. Additionally, the structural design has not taken advantage of the corner, that which is Adams and 48th, as it has not oriented itself to address both streets. And then moving on to parking standards, the application is deficient by the 3 guest parking spaces. It requires that 7 parking spaces, or the site requires 7 parking spaces, but it only provides 4, and that is including 1 on-street parking space. So there are only 3 parking, like guest parking spaces on site, and the 1, meaning the 4th parking space, is provided on street. A waiver has been drafted to allow for this deficiency. However, the applicant has failed to provide alternatives to on-site parking, which would help to mediate for this deficiency. It is up to the design review committee to determine if granting this waiver to parking code standards helps to create a better development that meets the planned unit development purpose statements of 86B7. There was not enough information for staff to thoroughly review the landscape plans. Staff has conditioned compliance. However, the condition is very generalized in that it simply would require further analysis for compliance at a later date and prior to construction. The proposed species of trees along the frontage consist of a mix of crabapple and linden trees. There are 4 crabapple trees, which are class 1 trees. And class 1 trees, although permitted, do not meet the intent of street trees. So the intent of code is to require the large high branching trees to allow for shade and environmental, as well as the safety of pedestrians, all the benefits. It has been conditioned in the decision document to work with staff regarding the type of trees planted along both Adams and 48th Street to better meet the intent of street trees. And as far as the waiver regarding perimeter landscaping and the section of code in the staff report regarding the perimeter landscaping, it would be 84I5. These comments in the waiver are no longer applicable as the conditional use permit known as CUP fee 2022-0014 was denied at the September Planning and Zoning Commission hearing. So that adjacent property along I'll call it the northwest side, the one that currently has that access easement, is no longer permitted as a commercial use. That there's a residence on site in the commercial use that has been operating out of there is no longer permitted. So the perimeter landscaping adjacent to that northwestern property boundary line is no longer required, and thus the waiver also is not required.
So Hannah, is the north and west sides? Or just the north? Or excuse me,
So-
just the west?
I would say on paper, it's probably just the west that you're looking at. If you look, it's 48th Street, the project, and then the western side. Property boundary line.
Okay, so do
This-
we not have perimeter landscaping required on the north?
So.
Those are just
what I'm-
residences or?
Yeah, what I'm showing on the screen right now is there's about a 14-foot 8-inch setback. If you can read it, that is the required access easement or the discussed access easement. So that was not going to be perimeter landscaping anyways, even though code would have required it. So the site with the pedestrian pathway, that access easement and lack of space for perimeter landscaping was not code compliant. But with that adjacent property that entails the access easement no longer being a commercial use, the perimeter landscaping is not required along that western property boundary line.
Okay, what about the north? Is there anything required along the north boundary? Where the drive entrance is that?
Let me see. I believe to the north it's residential properties. In which case it would not require perimeter landscaping. So, we had someone from the audience here say that to the north is a mobile home park, which we would consider residential,
Okay,
which would not require perimeter landscaping. And then lastly, we can get into common open space requirements. So the minimum requirement of the site is to be 10% of common open space. There is about 3,262 square feet of common open space identified on the plans, which accounts for only about 8%. So the site is deficient 2% common open space. The applicant has, on the other hand, requested that the rooftop patios of each unit counts towards that common open space requirement. However, it doesn't meet the intention of code for common open space, as those are private spaces, rooftop patios, and not that the public can use the common open space of a development, but the intention of code is to allow for all individuals within that development to be able to utilize the common open space. Additionally, there are questions regarding the common open space that was calculated in the site plans. As there are minimal dimensional standards for common open space. For example, it needs to be at least 400 square feet in area with a minimum length and width dimension of 20 feet. So 20 by 20 common open space can only count towards that common open space requirement. And then last but not least, in accordance with the planned unit development diversity of housing types, known as Garden City Code 85A6, it also requires a variety of lot sizes as allowed by the zoning district to encourage and accommodate for a range of housing types and sizes. As discussed previously in historical design review committee and planning and zoning commission hearings, it's determined that the Planning and Zoning Commission is responsible for determining whether or not the application is meeting the variety of housing types that is required for a planned unit development, whereas the Design Review Committee is responsible in determining whether the application is providing enough design variety. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal?
Just quick question on the common open area. Where is the common open area calculated now? Is it just some of the lawn spaces?
Correct, yeah.
And what about the drainage facility? Is that just calculated as something separate, or is that going towards, is that landscape area as well?
I would have to look at the plans submitted specifically to remind myself. But the stormwater swells, I believe they do count towards landscaping requirements, but they wouldn't be counted towards common open space. I would have to look into that code more in more detail.
Yeah, I think if they're done correctly, they can be utilized as common open space. That can be that space. I've seen it utilized for lots of different things, even like little dog park run around areas and
Yep.
I mean, all kinds of stuff like that, that when you have a storm event or what have you, and it's not being used at that point in time, but every other time it can be. So if they aren't calculating that, that should be considered.
Yeah, and then designed as such.
Correct.
Mhm.
Just to clarify, it does say that stormwater facilities, when it designed in accordance with Article A, general provisions of the chapter, can be utilized.
Perfect.
Right. Seeing no other questions for staff, I'll open it up for public testimony, and I'll call on Justin Frieden first. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Justin Fredin, Fredin. I'm an attorney with the firm of Hawley, Troxel, Ennison, Hawley, 877 Main Street, Suite 200 in Boise, 83702. And I am here on behalf of Bliss Properties LLC, which owns the adjacent property located at 4810 North Adams Street. And my sole purpose in appearing here today is to protect the easement that we've discussed already briefly on the applicant's property that provides access to my client's property. And more specifically, this is a 15-foot wide easement on the applicant's property, parallel to the boundary line between the two properties, which provides the only vehicular access to my client's property. With respect, we don't feel that there's any legitimate dispute regarding the validity of this easement. We've provided ample evidence that the easement exists and remains valid. The applicant has provided no evidence to the contrary. We appreciate staff's attention to this issue, as well as the applicant's efforts to redesign its project to accommodate the easement. We do note, however, that the site plan currently shows a setback of 14 feet 8 inches, which is not acceptable because it is short of the 15-foot requirement. The applicant did verbally inform us that the site plan is erroneous and that the setback is meant to be 15 feet. Nevertheless, the applicant then went on to state that a fence may be constructed within the easement, and that would likewise be unacceptable. We support staff's proposed recommendation number 2. However, we would respectfully request a simpler statement, one that is clearer for all parties involved, which would simply state, no encroachments shall be constructed within the 15-foot access easement associated with the adjacent property located at 4810 North Adams Street. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this matter. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Frieden?
I do not.
I don't have any.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. The next person that we have is Mike Maraglio.
My name is Mike Moralio, with Bliss Properties, owner of 4810 Adams Street. I am opposed to this development on a number of items. Number one, the current design does show the encroachment of the easement. As Justin has referenced, we've tried approaching the adjacent applicant since before June on this issue, and nothing's been resolved on that. The other thing is the detail involved with the design on that side of the development between 4810 Adams and 4800 Adams L Estates. There's not sufficient detail in the design to understand if that fence and retaining wall is off of the 15-foot easement, which is a driveway that goes with the property. Additionally, the separation wall, proposed separation structure proposed by the applicant is unclear due to the lack of detail if it could really actually be a barrier to protect people and pets from crossing over onto the driveway, which would create unsafe conditions for all parties involved. So, also with, 14 townhomes tried to be squeezed into this property, you're going to be looking at adding 58 or 56 approximately four people per person, kids and adults, 28 cars, 24 cats and dogs, somewhere around that. So there really needs to be a good separation between this subdivision and the adjacent properties in order to protect all parties, children and safety. Finally, the applicant submitted a wall and they have a swale that's in the back corner, and I say northwest corner. And that swale, because they have a lack of open space and common space, that's going to be where all the kids, cats and dogs are. The applicant also shows a gate going into the adjacent driveway right there. And just again, creates huge safety concerns, legal concerns, trespassing concerns, both parties. So, again, this easement issue has been brought up to the council committee over the months, and it'd be great, I think, for all parties to resolve this. The second thing is this design is non-compliant with Garden City Code on a number of fronts, which as staff report pointed out. Some of these things that I'll highlight is this efficient parking spaces by 3 parking spaces. Again, where are these people going to park? They're going to probably park in the easement and try to unload into their back doors over the gates, which causes an issue in the easement, which they don't need to use because they have front access. The other thing is the open space, page 7 of the applicant's original submittal in September was unclear on where the open space requirements were. So again, it looks like the whole lot's can be built out, and if there's no open space provided, 56 people, cars, kids, everything else are going to use the easement and everything else, find places to go, and just mucks up the whole block. So anyways, just to conclude, again, I think it would be helpful to the staff reviewing and everybody if we have more details of the barriers in place to protect the legal easement and make sure we don't create unsafe conditions and legal risk for both parties. Additionally, I think a separation wall would be appropriate on the west side of this subdivision in order to make sure everybody's protected. So I think a 7-foot kind of separation wall would really make sure nobody tries to cross over, trespass, and maybe get hit by a car from that's using the driveway at adjacent property. So just like to ask the commission to maybe request these additional details before this process moves forward, just to protect all properties and make sure that the design is fully vetted before kicking the can down the road pre-construction. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Moralio?
I don't have any.
Thank you. Next up would be Gordon Sampson.
Oh, I'm loud, so it doesn't matter. My questions are on, I live on 412 East 48th. And this is, we're basically adjacent to it, to the north of this development. So I'm just, I haven't seen yet, I haven't got a chance to look into it. I've just seen these signs, but what is the target start date, and what is this development going to actually do to all the residents, you know, around this general vicinity? Because like this gentleman had said, you know, it's already congested with the amount of you know, residents in this area, you know, and I mean, just the numbers, you know, him throwing out there, you know, with the you know, the people per unit, the animals and stuff like this. Is the whole is that just the beginning of what's about to happen in this whole area in Adams? I mean, is right down the road to the south, there's also those 3-story apartments that are or townhomes that are there. So is that what development is turning into in this area? And what kind of time frame are we looking at? Because there's a bunch of different residents, you know, around this project. You know, development and, you know, is a good thing, but all the little people that live around it and stuff have kind of a voice for them, you know, because there's old people, handicapped people, you know, and stuff, you know, that would have nowhere to go. And, you know, what's that going to do to them? And, you know, what kind of time frame are they looking at? Because they did the same thing, you know, developers have done the same thing a little farther east. And this just happened, I think, relatively last year. My wife's boss, her and a bunch of people who lived in a trailer park and everything right around Christmas were forced out of their homes, you know, and they had nowhere to go, you know. And so is this going to be one of those type of things, you know, that L Estates bought the corner, but you know, they're they have another partner or something that is buying up the rest of them to develop the entire thing, you know, behind closed doors, where all these other residents are just going to get blindsided. You know, because, you know, a lot of them, you know, like I said, are handicapped, old, you know, have no place to go. And, you know, I just, you know, as a voice, I do construction, you know, I'm turning a house that I just bought, you know, in the area, you know, but the neighbors in the area where the place that I'm turning, they're really nice people, and they're kind of worried, you know, people who can't come down to meetings like this and stuff, you know. I have the opportunity, you know, because of my job that I can, you know, so those are kind of things that I'm just down here to figure out, you know, questions for them, type of thing.
Great, thank you. And before I turn it over, I will let the applicant respond to the time frame that they do have. And just a lot of the development that will occur within Garden City is market driven, as long as it's legally proposed. And so a lot of that the city might not be able to respond to, as the applicant might not be able to respond to as well.
Yes, I can respond to target construction date.
Ms. Orr, before we turn it back over to you, I want to make sure that there's no questions for this gentleman by the committee, as well as there's no further testimony that's to be provided.
No
and it's
questions.
looking like no questions, and there's nobody else in person signed up. Is there anybody online that wishes to provide testimony on this matter? Thank you, sir. If you do, you can utilize the raise your hand feature, or you can just speak up. And seeing none, with that, I will turn it back over to you, Ms. Orr.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I can speak to target construction date. Target construction date would be Q3, Q4 of 2023. All of that, of course, dependent on plating and approvals of design review, planning and zoning, city council, as well as building permits. I can also speak to, there are proposed CCNRs that can help enforce a per unit per animal limit. And so we aren't just trying to create something that's more of a nuisance for everyone down the road. But those CCNRs that were submitted also do help to create some of those limitations for the units themselves. And yeah.
And thank you, Ms. Orr. This is your time to provide any further rebuttal that you wish to provide. If that's all the rebuttal you wish to provide, that's fine. But if you do wish to provide anything else, this is your time to do so.
Sure, yeah, and I can speak also to the retaining wall and the separation between the properties. In the presentation that was provided, there is a detail showing what that separation will look like. Speaking to the shortage of 4 inches for the easement, that's just a mistake of dimensions in the plans. It is 15 feet. And then in the detail for the retaining wall on slide 10 of the presentation, again, we are showing a 4-foot high retaining wall as well as a 3-foot 6-inch minimum required fence or railing feature, giving a 7-foot 6-inch separation between the property to the northwest and our property between that easement. And so realistically, there is no possibility of someone parking their vehicle there and being able to unload or load anything within there, because there will be pretty adequate separation. And that's pretty much it, I would say.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I didn't mean to cut you off. If you had more.
Nope, you're totally fine.
All right, thank you. And seeing no questions from the committee members, we can close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
You want to start, Derek, or you want me to?
Yeah, I can start. I think that again, the repetitive nature of street elevations and engaging with the street on a lot of applications is significant in this one as well. Especially the side, well, it's not the side street, it's the short side. So we need to see those end caps engaging with the street, having street connection, having a sidewalk. It looks like the corner unit, just the door was turned to face the street, but the access wasn't, and certainly the elevation itself doesn't address the street with the fenestration and kind of how that corner unit is presented. And then also brought up in the staff report and pretty obvious from the elevations is kind of the stoop and the entry. And I think that's an opportunity that was missed to create kind of the sense of place that each one of these can be. There's really great. And I do commend the, kind of the solid and void and kind of taking these blocks of shapes and blocks of colors and kind of pushing and pulling them into each other on that elevation. I like that, but we do need something that says, here's where the door is, and have some sort of kind of protective cover over that. So that's an opportunity for kind of one more design element that can really make that that street kind of come to life and look active. So those were the big ones. I think, yes, landscaping in that, being intentional about the landscaping in that drainage swale, whatever that is, or the drainage swale is within and under permeable pavers, and then you can really take advantage of that back corner for a number of uses, not just a shared use with a drainage swale, if you can capture that in the road bed itself, in the drive bed itself. I think that may, and I didn't do the math. Hannah's better at that sort of math than me, but the 2% that it was short may or may not have been, if it wasn't counting that drainage swale, then obviously we'll be fine there. But just to bring up the common space versus private space, I don't think that private rooftop decks should be counting as common open space. They're distinctly different and not intended to be the same thing. So that needs to meet it by itself. What else was there? The variety of housing we've talked about, and I don't think this meets it as far as the it looking to be a planned unit development, but that's something for planning and zoning to determine as well. I think that's all I had. Those are the big items I had.
Any thoughts on the parking?
Oh yeah, 3 shy. I think as it stands, there's nothing written in the waiver. It just says we want a waiver for 3 parking spots shy. So I want to see reasoning for that. I want to see the alternatives that they're using and putting into this project, not just we want a waiver because we want a waiver. So let's address what are you doing in this project that suggests there's alternatives to parking that are going to meet that need.
I would agree with those comments, and I might just kind of add a little bit, another comment or for some discussion, just that we'll say the end of the drive, ending at would be Adams Street.
Yep.
There. I just have I guess I have a little bit of concern on, okay, how does that look from Adams Street? And should something, just like we talk about this terminus view, okay, well, it is the end of the drive, but it's something that you're going to be next to as a pedestrian at that level, not necessarily driving down it and looking at what's at the end. But it just concerns me that that's not the most exciting thing to be walking on the street side. It's almost looking into a parking lot. You're looking down a drive aisle from that direction. I would like to see some kind of treatment there, screening element, maybe even something that could be integrated into the building design, or something to create an end to that. Yeah. And, I think something can be done there.
Well, there's also an opportunity to have those end unit garages be more internal, and then the drive doesn't have to go as far, perhaps. And then there can be, the landscaping can creep in past the corner of the buildings. It looks like right now the garages are against the street, basically. But if the unit was mirrored and the garages were internal, then there could be that much less drive length and more landscaping and an opportunity to do something creative there.
I would like to see something done there to create an edge between that and the pedestrian street frontage side.
Yep.
I guess, it could be done in a combination of landscape and the screening element, or just one, or what have you. But I agree on the parking. If there's going to be a reason for reducing guest parking and forcing that onto the street in the neighborhood, then I think there has to be a methodology, a reasoning, some kind of offsetting factors of why that should be considered. And so I would be looking for that. I think we need to see a revised site plan that really addresses the calculation of the open space and what's included and what's not. for compliance, and also to address what gets approved, that it's not showing something that's impeding on easement area.
Right.
Would the committee be in favor of changing the condition that Mr. Frieden noted to no encroachments within the 15-foot easement?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I do think that we're gonna need to see this again, and I think I would like to see it indicated correctly on there and called out as an easement, and if in fact it's a legal easement, that it should be noted that way. But a corresponding condition to condition that so that there's not foundation work or anything subsurface type elements.
Well, I think I'm not reading the easement as a attorney, of course, but I think the easement is just ingress and egress, right? They could have the footing of their wall could be there as long as there's ingress and egress for that distance.
I
But
guess
I'm not
I
an
guess it
attorney.
just depends. Yeah, it just depends on really what the
Yeah.
what the easement.
Right. I might suggest that it may be helpful as well to address some of these items, to address the purpose statement within the plan unit development ordinance. I believe that this application provided a variance application instead of a plan unit development application, and it's been processed as such. But perhaps if this is coming back, the applicant can provide that application to go through those different objectives that are found on that application.
So it wasn't a PUD at this point. It was
It's been processed, and perhaps I'm incorrect when I looked through the application materials. I believe that they provided the application for a variance for the PUD portion versus the application for a PUD.
Oh, but our draft decision has the PUD required findings in it.
We did get a
Correct.
planned unit development application form. It just wasn't submitted with the initial
Okay, thank you.
submittal, so
So strike that comment then, so that is in there.
yeah. I believe it was April 26th, 2022 that it was submitted in.
Thank you.
No, there it is.
And has P and Z reviewed it as a PUD?
I think that there was a sidebar over here. The PUD application was in subsequent application materials. So it is a part of the application documents. And so strike that comment from me, please.
Okay.
And they're scheduled for Wednesday, October 19th. For planning and zoning.
So would the applicant be in favor of moving to a date certain of November 7th in order to address comments? Or
Yes.
later?
No, November 7th would be just fine.
Thank you.
I'd move this to a date certain of November 7th then.
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
All right, thank you. And then the next item on our agenda is design review fiscal year 2022, number 16. Hanna Ball is requesting new construction of 8 live work units located on lots 27 and 28 and 29 and 30 of Fairview Acres subdivision number 5. With that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Ball.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Design Review Committee. Let me pull up my notes. I apologize. So thank you for everybody's time and comments at the last meeting. We really gained a lot of useful information that I think has made the project a lot more valuable, a lot more visually stunning. So this is a small scale project that uses the Cyril Mitchell Live Work Code. This project is in the heart of the district and it encompasses 4 total lots on East 34th Street. The project will create 16 total living units, small scale, that will be naturally more affordable due to their smaller than average size. All living spaces are paired at the 1-to-1 ratio with small workspaces. This project will allow for more artists and entrepreneur and entry-level businesses to come into our community and grow with us throughout our community. This project will activate these lots and provide for new pedestrian connectivity, along with sidewalk and internal circulation patterns that are open to the community through the courtyards. We believe that this project will contribute to the vibrancy of the neighborhood and support local artists, businesses, and future entrepreneurs of Garden City. Thank you, guys. And next, I'm going to turn it to Jason, who worked diligently on this file, so he might have a few more comments.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So I just want to kind of give a recap of our previous, because we had a pre-app meeting. And so I think I just want to recap that real quick so everybody can kind of remind everybody what I think was the discussion, because it's been maybe a little bit of time since that pre-app. But so first, this project does have a dedicated alleyway in the back. It's 20 feet wide, 200 feet long at this point. We're obviously looking to extend that alleyway to the neighboring adjoining properties. We've actually got an easement in place with all the current neighboring properties, except to the point where it ends. And so at the point where it ends, we've been in discussions with those neighbors. They're interested in using the alley. They're just not quite ready to develop yet. They've been in talks with some tenants about possibly doing development there. And so it is possible that that alley will actually extend through and then either come out on 34th Street, or maybe eventually it could come out on Clay. Having said that, I think one of the issues that came up was with our landscaping along the boundary with that neighbor, and maybe where fencing would be if we had to have fencing. So I think we're happy with that being some condition of approval, where we would have the flexibility to, like, say, not put a fence at the end of that alleyway if the neighbor ends up working out a deal to connect to it. You know, like I said, it's kind of a complicated thing because they're not quite ready to develop, but that was one of the discussions. I think we had maybe some discussions about the landscaping over there. And yeah, again, one of our hopes is just like these two properties have kind of created this kind of a cool pedestrian space between them. We hope that our neighbor to the south might be interested in kind of creating that same pedestrian space, in which case we would just hope that the condition would allow for that type of pedestrian connectivity to exist between those properties if they decide to develop. I think the last time we saw you guys, our actual drawings, we had like a discrepancy where the buildings were flipped. And I think now we flipped them. So what you see in the updated materials is now corrected. The entryways where the courtyards connect is actually flipped to the way it was supposed to be. I know after I'm done here, Hatch is going to talk about one of the biggest thing that we talked about at the previous hearing was the residential entryways and what those should look like and how they should kind of be addressed, because all the residences are basically accessed through a stairwell from the first floor. All the residential units are on the second floor, if you'll remember. And so there was some concern that we want to have maybe a little more focus, attention to that, or something that at least allows them to address. So we've actually got some examples for you guys to look at and see if we're getting to something that you like and something that you can pick out. So I think we got like maybe 4 different looks of how those entryways could look, and we can talk about that. I think Hatch is going to talk about that next. I think one of the things Hanna wanted was like an art fence. Like if we do have to put a fence up along Snowden's property, which is the property to the south, she wanted to make sure that it could be an art fence and that it could be approved at staff level. And I think that was fine. The other big question we had last time was about the balconies and whether they could possibly encroach. And I think there was some discussion that they might be allowed to encroach 2 feet into the setback. We never did get an answer, so we haven't updated that in a site plan. So right now those balconies literally exist at the setback. But if they were allowed to encroach, I think we could, if staff determined that those 2-foot encroachments weren't a building encroachment and that the columns that came down could be in the setback, then I think we would be willing to look at extending them. Because that would right now our balconies are basically 5-foot balconies. And I think if we could extend them into the setbacks, we'd have 7-foot balconies that'd be a little more usable. And so we're open to that. I think I don't think we've gotten an answer on whether they consider the actual support beams as an encroachment. So that was kind of discussed, but we really didn't know. And like I said, I think once again, that could be a simple condition that would allow us to just extend those balconies out 2 feet if it was something that was allowed. We previously had talked about the side street balconies and maybe having privacy. I think as we kind of discussed it afterwards, and I think we like the level of privacy to have with the hanging planters. And I don't think we want to have, at least at this point, I'm not sure that we want to have more. I think there was some discussion that we could have some opaque covering or something that would keep you from seeing in. But again, those are pretty tiny balconies already. So we're not really worried about the privacy on the balcony itself. But that's something we're open to discussing. Outdoor storage on the balconies was discussed. And I think we pointed out that it would be covered in the CC&Rs. I will point out that I think the last time we were here at the pre-app, there was some parking questions. I think those have now been answered, and that this project does meet the parking requirements for Garden City. So I think the updated staff report shows that. And lastly, I think another big thing that's always coming up is how are we going to do trash? So we've actually proposed a couple of possible locations for trash. And it's really going to come down to a couple of things. I mean, we're obviously hoping to have a shared trash usage. And so we've actually got 2 locations on the adjacent properties. We did get letters from those property owners. One of them's me, and then one of them's Jerry, who's also involved in this project. So we're really flexible on where that trash will go. It's going to come down to Republic Services, but I think in the worst case scenario, we could just use toters. Again, we just have 16 units for this property here. And so I think that's our least preferred method. I think we're pretty sure that we can work out a trash location that Republic Services will be happy with, and that's going to work for everybody. We just had talks this week with Idaho Power, so we're looking at where we're going to place a transformer so that will cover the power needs for not just this project and the 2 buildings here, but even the neighboring project. And so we're kind of making sure that we are going to have enough power in the area and where those transformers are going to go. So we're kind of fitting all those things in right now to make sure that everything's going to actually fit and work. So like I said, we have shown some optional locations for the trash, but in a worst case scenario, for some reason, Republic Services refuses to accept any of those locations, we could do toters. And I think that's all I got, and I'll kick it to Hatch to do the updated residential entryway design.
Good afternoon, everybody. Jeff Hatch with Hatch Design Architecture. Our address is 200 West 36th Street, a fantastic town of Garden City. One of the considerations that the design review committee requested and challenged us to work on addressing was in regards to the residential entries. And so at the ground level, the consideration was making sure that we have an appropriate space that reads as a residential area. And with that, it kind of comes with two considerations. One, the consideration for safety and understanding that this is a private area and it's not public. And then the other consideration is just the function of the space. If we're gonna have a mail room, it's likely with the amount of units we have here, people will be dropping off packages. And if we just leave an open air staircase, it leads to some interpretation of how that's actually gonna function. And so in talking with the owner, we've come up with a couple different options for engaging that and incorporating a mail room. And so first option is we would have a dedicated mail room area, and then we would have our open staircase. We would have signage and indicate that as the access for the lofts, and then they would have their private access for the mail room. It's another view of that option. In our next iteration, we've done almost the same thing, except we've added a little bit wider area, and we feel that this notch creates kind of a defined space that feels a little bit more like an actual intended opening to pause in this and say this is an entrance to a different transitional area. So you can see in here that same mailroom, same entry. We've pulled the signage back and made that separate from the more commercial frontage walkway. And here's another view of that. So from there, we went a step further and said, that reads to some extent, but it also still feels like it's kind of just a staircase out there. And what can we do to go a step further and achieve more of a residential feel? And so in this iteration, we've actually enclosed both the mailroom and the stair with storefront. And in doing so, we've gotten kind of an open air lobby to the upstairs, but it's secured from the general public. And so with that, you can see this storefront and signage dedicated to those lofts. So here we have the mailroom with the lobby and stairs going up, and another view. And then lastly, we have a similar concept, except the access for the mailroom is secured. And so if you had guests and visitors, they would be able to come and go, but access to that mailroom is just for the residents. So similar appearance on the front. Consideration would be is that you'd have this door separating that mailroom and from balance, and having just one designated door at the residential access versus having the two. So in summary, we have our first iteration of the mailroom, the open. We have the mailroom with the notch. We have the mailroom and the stairs merged. And then we have the mailroom separate with a single access leading up to the lofts. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Hey, Jeff, can you pull up a site plan and show me which each of the entrances are? That's the first thing. And then is there a mailroom at each entrance, one for each building?
There would be a mailroom for each of the individual projects. So 2 mailrooms currently proposed.
Yeah, okay, for each building.
Yes. The quantity doesn't really merit having them at each staircase. We would just have them.
Yeah.
Building. Okay. And then as far as your request, let me pull up the site plan one moment. Might be easier on. So as you can see here, engaging the street, we would have that proposed mailroom be on the street facing side. in order that if you have, Amazon packages and things that they can park
Is that a street over there on that side?
on, I'm all turned around.
Yeah, you might be turned around there, Jeff.
Yeah, that's
So,
the common lot,
from-
right?
Yes, from our coordination meeting with the client, their intention would be to have the mailroom located on the street facing side. In this case, we have car over here. And so we would want that so that if you have, a delivery vehicle, they can park and easily access that for packages, means, but then also from a visibility standpoint, having the on the street is a little bit easier. Now, as far as the second building, I think we're open to suggestions if that is also on the side of the building mirroring the original, or if we propose that to be internal to the side along this common driveway, we'd probably put it on the rear one so that it's easily accessible from the alleyway side. But we did definitely want to make sure this one was located, and the intent would be that it is shown here.
Okay, yeah, I guess I can see that one because it's on the street
Yes.
to have that direct connection and visual connection, but the other one doesn't get that because of where it is. It's either on a common, but just kind of that to me, because it's the common lot line on that side of the building, it's going to be a little bit removed, a little bit hidden. I think I threw out a suggestion in the last meeting that, maybe a thought might be is to look at having those main pedestrian access points on that inside walkable pedestrian spine. So you almost create both of those entrances kind of get the same thing. They're having their identity and connection to the street through that pedestrian walkable area, if you will. And I think what I struggle with is in the options that you put together is it's all at that lower level. And if that's fine if I'm looking at it straight on, I'm driving by on the street and I can kind of visually get that connection, but something more like some blade signage or something to grab you for the other one would be necessary because it doesn't get that same exposure. And so if there was some kind of a design element that calls attention to it that you would get walking parallel to the wall plane, where it would be conducive to having that inner pedestrian area, that to me that seemed like maybe a solution that takes care of both of them and gives them both some identity coming off of that space. But
so
that was just a suggestion to look at.
Yeah, so if we look at you're suggesting maybe have them both located on the center spot.
Yeah, something like of that nature.
And can they both be close to the road internally? Like, can they both be right where that left-hand one is now? Like
Directly opposite each other?
Yeah, can they both, because that might give them both more strength together. It's like that's where the residential entry is, no matter what building you're going into.
That's just kind of right off 34th Street, just as you enter into that, let's call it linear plaza space.
Yeah.
And
then it's not, and then someone's like, oh, I thought I was going to this building, but I was going to that building, and then it's kind of central. It's a central entry.
Because that at that point, in my mind, at that point when you're pulled off of the street into that space, you're really visualizing and connecting at that lower pedestrian level.
Mm-hmm.
If you're driving by, I would almost want to see more a stronger identity element at the street frontage of telling me, oh, there's the entrance over there. Now I'm going to look for my parking spot and what have you. And you only have one entry that can really have that kind of connection. So
you think pulling them both and localizing into this will help convey that a little bit clearer? Because then you're seeing it as you're going east or westbound, that's where the residential area is.
I think you have the opportunity then to create the identity for those entrances and in the strength of that plaza and that entrance to the plaza and what that walking street, so to speak. It just seems to me it gives it more, the same amount of importance to both entrances for both of those buildings, projects. And quite honestly, for me, I feel that something that leaves the stairwell open, if that's a possibility, you're showing options 1 and 2 versus the closed off storefront, feels more commercial, less residential. So if you do something that leaves it more open like that, and then maybe there is some type of blade signage element that you can work into the overall aesthetic, whether it's, yeah, like that, you know, so you'd be able to see it as you're moving into that pedestrian plaza.
Okay.
It would kind of grab your attention.
Maybe at like 90 degrees to that, Brett.
Yeah, and maybe since primarily people would be coming from that direction, maybe your option 2 down there, you can, you know, I don't know if there's something that you do because you got that little recessed niche that maybe that gets some signage, or maybe that, well, I was thinking of, you see how the recessed niche is on the side of the stairwell? Yeah. So maybe that plane and the other plane that is perpendicular have some kind of artistic signage. Yeah, that plane and then the other one.
This one here.
Yeah, maybe that incorporates some kind of a artistic signage element that, you know, creates some identity to that little negative space there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that could be really cool. It would be subtle, but it would also be really effective too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like bringing them together as well. I think that's going to be a stronger thing. And Brett, your comment of, you know, we've become a pedestrian, so we are going to see this and it's going to be more obvious because we're now walking, right? It's not in a lot of projects, we want it to be that car scale, that going by at speed, like where is the residential entry? I'm looking for it on my bike or in a car, but we've kind of removed the person from the car and now we're walking, so it's a less obvious big architectural statement and more of a, oh, here I am, it's right next to me, I'm on foot, I'm going slow.
Yeah, and
So
I think that the material choice on whatever clads that mailroom element plays into that part. It's not just the same thing we've used in everywhere to make it look like it's just another portion of the building. It kind of creates this identifiable, this is the entry component. It's got some different materials that work into the overall palette, but set it apart. It's not just the same colors of metal panel or.
So Commissioner Labrie, as a consideration, make sure I understand what you're saying, this art signage or whatever ends up being here, that could be carried through, you know, on this back wall too, so that space feels like.
Well, yeah, I was just seeing where you have the same red corrugated panel and then the blue where you've got it up top in option 1, but that's the same panel, that material that you've been using all around the building. Maybe this is an opportunity to utilize a different material that really calls attention to that entry element at the pedestrian level there. Something unique. And then I think with those, it addresses that creating its own identity, and it does it in a way that's, you know, just at that pedestrian level. And
So what I'm hearing from Commissioner Labrie is that option 2 is probably favorable with a couple additional selections. Commissioner Hurd, is that seem?
I'm in agreement. I like the recess, the negative, and the open stair for sure. And you have an opportunity to think about how they're both going to talk to each other too, the two residential entries, because it's kind of the same form and the same function. So if that's triggering us as we're walking down, like there's entries, which entry do I want? They can kind of be the same thing, but have their own voice because it is two different projects.
Mhm. Yeah, understood. And then for the, I guess the stairwell that doesn't have the mailroom connected to it, we would still have that same language and signage, things of that nature. And then we would just want to be mindful of the materiality that connects those two. Does that seem?
And those are on the opposite sides of the building, right?
Yes, correct.
Yes, is the
Yeah,
answer to it.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I have to say, I really liked the idea of pulling the art all the way through on the
Mm.
interior.
Okay.
We technically are in a public hearing still, and I think this has all been counted towards part of the applicant's presentation. That you certainly can have more dialogue and questions with the applicant, but if you're ready, I can turn it over to Ms. Veal for a staff report.
Sure.
So this application, as you know, has chosen to apply the live work create overlay. There are a total of 16 live units with a total of 16 work units. However, they do not appear to have a direct connection between the live and the workspaces. There are on-street permeable pavers shown as the chosen stormwater treatment method for ACHD right-of-way. And there could be potential conflict with the street trees, as I will go into further into this report. There also is potential conflict with the trash enclosure being a shared unit due to the capacity, the location, and the longevity of the agreements that are required to ensure that this is legal. Republic Services and the Garden City Utility and Billing Office officials have issues regarding the shared refuse. So as I have already mentioned, the Searle Mitchell Live Work Create overlay is applied to this review. However, it should be noted that the application is compliant with Garden City Code 82B3 form standards of the C2 zoning district in which it is residing in. There are no proposed encroachments as shown on the plans submitted. However, there has been discussion regarding the balconies encroaching into the 5-foot setback zone along the street frontage by 2 feet. This would allow for a 7-foot balcony, which would also act as a covered walkway for those beneath, as opposed to the 5-foot that is currently shown on the site plans. So in the pre-application discussions, staff as well as the committee and the applicant discussed the difference between Garden City Code 82B3 standards and Garden City Code Live Work Create setback standards, and that would be 8.3C. In reviewing the verbiage provided in both of these sections of code, Garden City Code 8.3C speaks to setbacks in which the application is required to meet. So front, side, interior, side, and rear setbacks. However, it does not specifically speak to encroachments that are permitted or prohibited. So when conflict such as this, or I guess more of an omission such as this, is present between what normally is a standard of Garden City Code versus that of an overlay. Staff has historically applied a more restrictive standard or has deferred to the code that which is not mentioned in the overlay, so the original code, so 82B3. So in this case, with encroachment, staff has deferred to Garden City Code 82B3 for encroachments, which allows for a 2-foot encroachment into that setback, the front setback zone, which was mentioned in the staff report. Also in the condition document, staff has drafted a potential condition to allow for this 2-foot encroachment into these setback areas, as long as the other reviewing agencies such as Boise Fire, the building code examiner, and potentially ACHD is granted. And further speaking to Garden City Code 83C, the Searle Mitchell Live Work Create setback standards or streetscape standards. It goes into subsection A1 that requires the front building setback to accommodate for a 5-foot wide sidewalk in a 2-foot building zone, or to be constructed with the adopted streetscape plan. So Garden City has resolutions 1062-19 and 1063-19, which have an adopted streetscape plan of 34th Street and Carr Street. These front setbacks of this application do appear to be consistent with the adopted streetscape plans. Additionally, it also appears to be consistent with the adjacent subdivisions of Casino Beach and Soul or Shavasana subdivisions. That consistency has also been conditioned, even though it looks to be, or it looks like it is consistent with those other subdivisions, but that is still conditioned in the decision document. And then another condition that staff has drafted would be requiring that the tree grates within the sidewalk be at least 4 feet by 8 feet, as opposed to the 3 foot by 3 foot proposed. Again, staying within the Live Work Create overlay standards, Garden City Code 83C, general provisions, living space requirements. There was a floor plan submitted. However, staff noted that there were some errors or discrepancies between the site plans and the proposed access. Essentially, through conversation with the applicants, we determined that both buildings, all dwelling units within those buildings are 2-bedroom dwelling units. The floor plans do show a lot of access points between the dwelling units and balconies, but they all do consist of 2 bedrooms, and that's how it's been reviewed. According to the compliance statement and the statement of intent, there's about 2,800 square feet of internal courtyard proposed. However, it's not completely clear as to whether that was the total square footage of both the courtyards for both buildings, or if it was just one courtyard is 2,800 square feet and the other one is as well. So just clarification there is needed. And then additionally, there is a community space located in both building A and building B, but the square footage of those community spaces aren't identified in any of the plans submitted. I will speak a little bit to the primary entrances and just that they were discussed during the design review pre-application meeting. It sounds like the committee and the applicant have hashed over the primary entrances a little bit more. So I just want to say that staff has not conditioned any condition in the decision document regarding these primary entrances. So anything that has already been discussed or is to yet be discussed that needs to be a condition does need to make it into that condition document. The application proposes 25 parking spaces for the 16 proposed live work units. Of the 25 parking spaces proposed, there are 16 enclosed spaces on site accessible from the common drive / alleyway. The remainder of the parking is proposed along 34th and Carr Street as parallel parking spaces. Subsection G requires that there be off-street parking space for each living space. So one parking space for one dwelling unit. So each living space has an on-site parking space. This is code compliant. And then subsection G2 states that no off-street parking is required for working spaces less than 500 square feet of the interior floor area. And as proposed, there are no workspaces larger than 500 square feet. So the application is not required to provide workspace parking spaces. The application is thus compliant with parking requirements. As far as the perimeter landscaping requirements go, there is a requirement to have perimeter landscaping along, I'll call it the southern property boundary line. Despite the adjacent properties' intentions of redeveloping at a later point, not providing code compliant perimeter landscaping would simply just be non-compliant. Even though there might be an intention to develop, that adjacent property owner is not required to develop to certain standard. So the perimeter landscaping should be required of this application. It has been conditioned to allow for the perimeter landscaping to be removed at a later point when and if that adjacent property is redeveloped in such a way that it's no longer required to have perimeter landscaping. And then there's the issue of the trash enclosures. The site plans show two different trash enclosure locations located off of the private alleyway. One is closer to Carr and the other one is more internal to the private alleyway. There has been signed documents of those property owners allowing for the use of these proposed trash enclosures. However, I just want to note for the record that the trash enclosures are proposed off-site. Staff has had conversations with Republic Services regarding the proposal of these locations, as well as the utility and billing department, and there are potential conflicts. Staff's major concern is that not only is one of those trash enclosures proposed to supply facilities for Park 33, that would be 7 live units and 7 work units, but it would also have to service the 16 live and 16 commercial units of this application. And those commercial components of both applications, Park 33 and this one, are still unknown at this point, and they could be ever evolving. And also, we could condition that there is a legally binding like shared use agreement between the trash enclosure and these properties. But the longevity of that, it would need to last the entirety of all properties involved in their existence and in this use's existence. And with that, I would also like to say that the capacity, so as I mentioned, they're all sharing this one trash enclosure. If you look at the end of the staff report, I've tried to create a superimposed image showing this application in Park 33 sharing that one trash enclosure location. The common drive does not have a turnaround, and so Republic Services cannot adequately access that proposed trash enclosure without any turnaround or adjacent property also redeveloping in such a way that the private alleyway is continued and there is an ingress egress location proposed somewhere else. So as it stands, Republic Services cannot access the proposed trash enclosure of Park 33 due to lack of a turnaround. So only trash carts can be permitted. And this is staff's understanding. Only trash carts can be permitted. However, that would conflict with the on-street parking spaces on Carr and 34th. And then another issue regarding 34th and Carr is that there are what appears to be proposed permeable pavers on these streets, acting as the ACHD required stormwater mitigation facilities. In other applications that have proposed permeable pavers on street, ACHD has not allowed for street trees to be within 10 feet of those permeable pavers. As such, the proposed street trees located on 34th and Carr for this application would not be permitted per ACHD in the locations that they're proposed. Instead, they would need to be set back at least 10 feet, which would then, as this site is proposing, the trees would be within the balconies of the structures. I would like to note that without the street trees being proposed, even if they are in conflict with ACHD's stormwater, it should be that the street trees are required, even if it requires a redesign of the site, or the stormwater mitigation, such as the permeable pavers, would need to be an alternative method of stormwater mitigation that needs to move and allow for those street trees. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal?
I don't have any. I don't.
All right. Thank you. Is there anybody present who wishes to testify? And if you're online, go ahead and utilize the raise your hand feature. Mr. Truax is here.
Commissioners, Ms. Veal and Ms. Thornborrow, thank you. This is a pretty darn cool spot. I've spent enough time in the quarter. It's a really cool use of live work. I think it's a hard thing to do to create live work. I think there's a creative approach to it. I think that it's got some challenges to deal with, but I think we all deal with those as mechanical issues in development. And I would say that if we can find a way to condition approvals with, Republic Services being satisfied by the end of it, it puts a creative solution back into the design team's hands. And the same with the paving systems. We all have to deal with that in ACHD. Hopefully over time becomes a little bit more flexible in how we do it. But I think that the eyes on the street and the people interacting and the sort of vertical green space between the floors feels super pedestrian. And I think that's going to be a huge add to down there. And if there are people that are forward leaning this way, I think that live and the work can actually happen. So that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Truax?
Not I.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to provide testimony? All right. Seeing none, I can turn it back over to the applicant team.
Okay, I'll kind of cover some general points and then team members might have a couple other. Thank you, Bill, for your comments, your positive comments. And I think like Bill said, some of these items are definitely collaboration, but go back to that design thing. So on the Republic Services, Hannah, I understand the concerns and we'll continue to work with them on a solution where everybody feels very comfortable. At the end of the day, if we had to go to the single individual cans, of course we would. That would be our fallback option. And we're happy to do that. But we think we can find solutions that will accommodate Republic Services. Also, the alley system that we designed does have permanent utility easements recorded that trash services are included in that alley easement. Likewise, with ACHD, we'll continue to work with them on what proposal they would like to see as far as drainage and with the incorporation of Garden City's policies for street trees. So that is something that's come up recently. It's something we didn't expect, seeing how ACHD approved the 34th Street streetscape plan, and now essentially they're modifying their original plan. So we will continue to have those conversations and find a solution for Garden City and ACHD. On the pre-limiter landscape, we're happy to satisfy that condition. On the tree grates, the 3x8, we're happy to satisfy that condition. I'll let Jeff Hatch speak to the courtyard square footage count. I am asking this committee for a 2-year period, entitlement period. And the reason is our teams are just a little bit slower. And realistically, what we find is by the time we have conversations and resolution with ACHD and Republic Services and Idaho Power, we're typically tacking on 3 to 4 months on just communication to even get resolution on these projects. So I'm asking the committee, please make an exception and allow a 2-year entitlement 2-year entitlement period to this file. Other than that, I'll turn it over to my team, but that was one item I didn't bring up previously. Thank you guys so much for all your hard work and dedication to this project.
Question came about the common areas. One of the revisions that took place since our last hearing was adding this large rooftop community area, which is accessible publicly for the residents, separate from the rooftop areas that are designated for the residents on the 3rd floor. So the residents on the 2nd floor are able to all enjoy that common area space. So that square footage plus the square footage of the common garden area in the center is that square footage that was proposed, and that would be per building, not aggregate. As far as the street trees go, you know, I think there's a couple different ways to address that, which can be done conditionally if the commission feels that that's appropriate. In some cases, our adjacency of 10 feet to the actual stormwater area is such that we could move that and still not impede in our sightlines. In other areas, we can relocate the street tree, still maintaining plenty of sufficient walking path, but being able to separate that from that 10-foot requirement. So I think the combination of those two strategies should be pretty easy to relieve that concern.
So you're saying push it to the back side of the sidewalk?
Our sidewalk is effectively about almost 14 feet wide. So right now, we would be able to accommodate that within essentially the center plaza portion of that larger sidewalk, still accommodating our 5-foot walkway underneath the canopy and still allowing for the walkway on the other side of that tree, especially if we look at more of a flush mount grate system versus something that's elevated.
Let me add to that, Hatch. I think in our talks with ACHD, there's some possibility of just connecting to the existing system, which is what Casino Beach ended up doing, in which case we would just not use the permeable pavers at all. There's also the chance of using permeable pavers in smaller locations so that you can still get enough drainage and yet move those permeable pavers further from the trees so that ACHD is satisfied. And so really, I think we're leaning toward just connecting to the existing system because it is right there at 34th Street. And so if that's able to happen, then we won't have permeable pavers at all. And the trees will stay right where they are. But, you know, ACHD's decision document just approved the plan that we submitted. So it's hard until we get further along for us to have those discussions with them. But one way or the other, we'll have the street trees. So the option we decide on will leave street trees there that are required by city code.
Then I have another question just related to the encroachment, and forgive me for not knowing, but how far would the structure be from the property line should the 2-foot encroachment be allowed?
So right now, the structure is 10 feet from the property line. And so the actual building is 10 feet from the property line with the actual, right now, even our balconies don't encroach in the setback. So I think we wouldn't actually move the building. We would just extend the balcony so they were a little bigger.
So
So the pole and the balcony is anything that's part of the structure. So the overhang, I guess, for the balcony.
Yeah, so to clarify Jenna's intent, the structure is currently at 5 feet. If we encroach 2 feet, then we would be at 3 feet from the property line.
Okay. And the reason I ask that is just because of building and fire codes. And so if we allow more than that, depending on how those are reviewed, that could create a hiccup further on down the road.
And like I
members
think
allow for that.
our real intent was that we could get those balconies a little bigger if it was allowed to encroach into the setback.
And Jenna, there would be 2 ways that we could achieve that. The first one, which would be ideal, would be to move the physical structure, the posts out, which would maintain the same language that we are currently proposing. The other option, if it's desired, would be to cantilever those 2 feet. And in that case, it's going to look similar, but it will, change the nature of that language a little bit.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicants?
Yeah, I do have one that I had noted on here. Is the intent still to utilize the hanging baskets as part of the required vegetation landscaping?
Yeah, I mean, I think our hope is to have permanent baskets there. I think that was kind of last time, I think you said if they were permanent and they were kind of welded into place.
I
And
think
so
that's the part that they need to be integrated into the building components. So if it's, integral to that railing system to where it couldn't be removed easily, then I think that my opinion, that it could be looked at as part of that permanent landscaping.
Well, and I think Brett, and I don't speak for all of it, but I think there's some thought that maybe these will end up being kind of condoed and that there will actually be some sort of association that actually does the management of the landscaping. And so like you will not actually own the thing hanging off the balcony if you own the unit next to it. So it's not like something you can even legally remove.
Yeah, and I think that's critical, is that it's irrigated, it's treated just like any other landscaping element.
Yeah, and it's designed as such too. It's designed as part of the overall look. It's not a tacked on.
Yeah.
I don't think that actually, when I was looking at the potential conditions, didn't really indicate that it's.
I think
it
we
needs
may
to be
have
permanently. So I want to add that in there.
Yeah, so Brett, I do think we added it into our language of our application. So it's probably in our application, but we can certainly add it as a condition. So I think the latest landscaping plan, we actually had Leslie update that landscaping plan to make those planters permanent. But you'd have to look and dig deep in there and find it. So I think after your comments last time, we made sure that that was added. But like I said, it's like in tiny little print and all of the stuff that's there somewhere.
And so,
It's,
committee member
it-
Labrie's,
It's not that hidden, so I was just.
Oh, you found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Hanging
It says,
material.
it says hanging plant material, but nothing that says it's a permanent planter.
So I think it's actually in her notes, maybe.
And that is something that can be,
Yeah.
verified in the actual
Yeah, yeah.
details of it.
Yeah, well,
It's
like I
not-
said, it can just be added as a condition if we can't locate it.
Mhm.
So I think that's fine.
I might note that condition number 4 does note that they have to be live material and automatically irrigated. That could also include that they need to be permanent and integrated into the
building materials or
building.
structure, either way. Yeah.
And I might also suggest, as mentioned by Mr. Jones, that I think at least that the CCNRs would take those over. And so that could also be another part of that condition, that it's part of the overall ownership instead of individual ownerships.
We're
we would be
comfortable
happy
with
with that.
those. Yep.
And one other thing to note, that we haven't discussed as a committee before, and it's not specific in our, in the code, but I thought it was interesting in reviewing the city of Boise's, streetscape manual. They do note that every tree is required to have 500 cubic feet of soil dedicated to the street trees, so that they won't die quickly. And so that's, I don't know what that would equate to if you opened up the tree grates. But that I might suggest that that might be something to strive towards. Again, it's not a code requirement.
So Jenna, as a condition, what was the size of the grates, or were they 4x8?
Yeah, 4x8, and that's consistent with what's been seen of Casino Beach.
Got it. Okay.
And again, if that 4x8 has the capacity for that much soil, we're fine with it. And just until we do calcs and design, I don't want it, I'd prefer it to not be conditioned, but absolutely, we're fine to fill that much space with that much soil so the trees can be sustainable.
Well, it says that's 15 feet deep.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Jones, without,
But I guess down 15 feet, there's probably some soil under there.
well,
Probably a lot of water too, where we're at. Yeah, I'm pretty sure if you dig a 15-foot hole here,
we can fill it with that much soil capacity. Well,
Well,
I'm just
you-
saying,
it-
I haven't
it's gonna fill
calculated,
with
it.
a, it's
Obviously you
gonna
did.
fill with a lot of water first.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. But yeah, again, we'll fill with as much soil that it can satisfy. You're right, that might be too much soil because we got high groundwater, but I see what Jenna's point is. Make sure there's enough soil that they're surviving adequately.
Okay, Jenna, are we closed public hearing into discussion or?
Yes, I believe we're now in communal discussion. And to committee member Labrie, unless there are any further questions to the applicants, we can go ahead and close the public hearing and open it up to the committee's discussion.
I don't have anything further.
Me neither.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments and considerations.
Thank you, guys.
You.
Do we have any direction on the street trees or refuse for the applicant?
Well, I think as conditioned in here, it actually, what does it say? Or the proposed conditions. If it's determined that the trash enclosure is not compatible, the application, an alternative process, they might be back in the process if the only option is on-site refuse pickup, which results in redesign. So I think that is really going to be up to Republic on what they're going to be okay with. They're
Yeah,
the ones that are servicing it,
Republic and the
so.
neighbors. And if we condition that they figure that out.
And if it does come on site and it causes redesign, and then depending on, where it is and screening and all the rest of that, if it needs to come back because it significantly changes some things, then I think that's picked up right in here.
Yeah. And then the other kind of big design element was the residential entries. And is that something that we can condition with what Jeff showed us for option 2 with some kind of art wall element that's, on both sides, and that both those entries are off of the pedestrian spine, and they have blade signage that's calling out residential entry or whatever the name of the development is.
And I think that, that is something that staff can review based on our comments and the discussion we've had here.
Yeah, and I think, Jeff provided enough information to basically it's designed, and then we had further discussion that will add to that design. And then the 2-year entitlement condition can be added. I think that's a pretty standard extension. And then the condition for I guess it was just adding some words to the conditions about the hanging baskets, that they be permanent and irrigated and architecturally designed. And
would that include the individual, not allowance for them to be controlled by individual owners, not having that allowance?
I'm not sure what you're saying.
That they be controlled by the structure rather than the individual condos, should it be condoed?
I think it needs to be treated like any other common area landscaping.
Yeah, I think we're counting it as that, so it needs to be controlled the same way.
Nothing to prevent people from personalizing by putting pots out on their balcony or doing something up next to their entry door.
Or pouring their ice water into the basket.
Similarly, Mr. Jones had testified about adding something in the CCNRs about not allowing for storage on the balconies. Would that be a condition that you would like to add?
I think it is, and I was looking at something that was maybe this condition here, prior to construction, 2BI, shared balcony areas within development are permitted to count towards this requirement for the minimum 80 square feet. Now, Jeff had mentioned that there's added rooftop space that I think can address that, but I don't think the balconies being the primary circulation elements are really conducive to much private utilization that would be the same as that 80 square feet of outdoor space for each living space. But now it might not need to be counted in order to meet the requirements at this point. Because it even says there, required property, okay, landscaping, entryway and other access ways shall not count towards this requirement. And then we got the shared balcony, which are access areas, are permitted to count towards it. And I think that's stating just the opposite. So I would strike that.
And then I think back to the question, yes, something conditioned that it's not storage space, because considering that those balconies are so public facing and so part of the architecture and the impact of on the street, it should look like architecture, not a open faced store more shed.
And then condition number 3 regarding the balconies. B notes if they encroach into ACHD right of way, approval from ACHD is required. Well, I appreciate that. It sounds like B can be stricken because they'll be wholly outside of the right of way.
Right. And then I think the option A, option B that Jeff talked about as far as structure of posts versus cantilevering and stuff like that, I think that's something that if it was one rather than the other, they could work through that and have staff level approval of that change.
And last but not least, do we need any conditions related to the drainage system and the street trees?
I think
I'd say
if the trees need to move, staff can review that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if they're able to comply with code, then.
Yeah.
Is there anything we've missed that needs to be specified in a condition or a motion?
I don't have anything else. Do you, Brett?
No, I don't.
I would move to approve with the conditions as discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Just for clarification, was the 2-year entitlement period a condition?
Yep, I mentioned it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a great evening.
Yep,
you.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Last but not least, file number design review fiscal year 2022, number 21, Brian Hollowell with Cushing Terrell, excuse me, is requesting a remodel to the Riverside Hotel located at 2900 West Chinden Boulevard.
I'm gonna plug in down below.
would like to thank everybody for sticking around for this last one. I know it's been a long day. So I'm pulling up the submittal materials here just for reference, and
You need to share the screen.
okay. Sharing the screen. Okay. Okay, so just for a quick point of reference, can you see, do you have a visual on the screen in the Zoom? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so quick point of reference. This project that we're seeking design review approval for is for courtyard improvements and sandbar restaurant. And what that entails is scope of work that is within this courtyard, if you can see my cursor. And it includes a new structure over this outdoor patio, and we call it the River's Edge Terrace event space. It's effectively just covering the plaza that we put in place about 7 years ago, approximately. And then taking the utilitarian functions of the current sandbar restaurant. Essentially, when the sandbar restaurant was built in the early 70s, late 60s, it was a fitness facility and central utility plant for the overall hotel as the hotel has been expanded upon. So it has a chiller building, electrical distribution room, fire sprinkler room, and then a pool house, also restroom facilities for this fitness building. And the fitness building is currently being used as laundry and for the hotel, and some exercise equipment is placed in there. And then the sandbar kitchen and serving facilities with outdoor plaza, dining space, all where you see these red tents and into this pool deck area. So what we are doing with this project is we are relocating the utility functions of this. And as we previously showed in our pre-app hearing, was that we're going to locate these in a basement portion of the new facility underground. And then we're placing the chiller on top of a enhanced, updated stair and elevator building. So we're adding what we call entrance 11, and we're replacing this stair that is deficient and looks like it's about to fully deteriorate. And so we're improving the safety of that by enclosing a stair, locating an elevator in there, some utilitarian functions of utilities that are exiting the building over in this corner where my cursor is, and then locating the chiller on top of that with this full screen to the top height of the chiller on top of that building. And then other improvements include improvements to this pool, generating 5 bodies of water instead of this single body of water. And the 5 bodies of water will include a larger hot tub, larger than the small hot tub that you see right here, and then an additional warm pool to emulate a resort-like springs experience, which is the vision that the client has had with this. And over those warm pools, there will be a pool house structure with a Lexan roof. So we will have a polycarbonate roof over this pool house, and then a polycarbonate roof over this outdoor pavilion, we call it the River's Edge Terrace. And then a main pool with swimming laps, slightly truncated. They'll be approximately 46 feet long, and then a splash pad, and then another basking pool with a low depth for folks to hang out in. Additional improvements will include taking the current outdoor dining space and locating that in this area along the green belt, which we feel will greatly enhance the communication of the activity zone with the green belt and create more of like a festive atmosphere from the pedestrian experience. Further improvements that are included are widening the green belt, essentially from this point of connection here, where my cursor is at the beginning of the end of the hotel wing, or the beginning of the access point off of 32nd Street, and widening that all along this length over to this point, where we're exiting, where we have this exit point and entry point for the green belt. Part of that is to include fire apparatus access for the backside of this with an enhanced safety access points. And then other improvements will be on this new sandbar facility, which will be an improved restaurant with rooftop patios. So there will be patio space on top of this roof with a bar that is essentially, it's equally facilitated from the first floor down to the second floor. So we do not have an elevator to that, but it is a bar that has equal function as the bar on the main level. So there will be an indoor outdoor bar in this restaurant, and a bar on the roof, and that will all be in enclosed outdoor seating zones with fencing, clear visible fencing along the perimeter. So that's the general understanding of what we're doing with these improvements. This project is phased in such that we are enabled to do this work to this pool because we have recently completed an indoor pool building that is located over here, and there will be an indoor hot tub and indoor laundry facility that is being displaced by the work done in this fitness facility. Okay, bounce over to here. So this is a bird's eye view of the sandbar restaurant. In the back, you will see the pool bodies with this pool house structure, and then the polycarbonate roof. Currently, the polycarbonate roof is being designed to be a hollow core structural steel, not hollow core, hollow structural steel HSS steel members with low corrosion. And we're looking at the potential of having an operable roof, but we are still working through the engineering of that to see how feasible that is. But that's the goal with that. And the structure surrounding that is going to be made out of tinted concrete, which will, in our minds, is planned to correspond with sandstone features that are highlighted throughout the facility, where we have natural sandstone elements. And then we have on the front side of the building, we have sandstone cladding elements. We have some other materials that are sandstone color that are a honed CMU block. And so with this pool structure, due to corrosion concerns within immediate proximity to the pool, we're looking at doing an integrated color concrete, and having that structure be resistant to corrosion and efflorescence. And then we're maintaining this access point, this node right here. We're enhancing this node and bringing folks in from the green belt into the main entry point, which is just beyond this view. It's at the center node. And then we have another access point on the backside here, crossing through and passing by this entrance 11 stair. And then there's another site node here. I will pull over this other DR aerial. So those nodes are this node off the green belt and this central node, which is the main vertex of which all these pathways meet, right in the center there, and also where the elevator and the entrance 11 stair empties out onto this circular node. The node captures some elevation gain. We are raising the footprint of the sandbar 1.6 foot above the current grade, which meets the new FEMA floodplain requirements. And then so with that, we are also we are elevating this sidewalk and then having to slope down to meet the grade of the green belt over at this node. And then we have a slow transition from here eventually having a stair down to the Greenbelt meeting point. And then we have access, ADA access to this outdoor dining space from a flush transition here, no elevation transition in the floor surface. And then we have the flush transition from the Greenbelt onto the patio over through the building. And then we have, I'm getting a little bit confused here, but we have a vault here that will be a utility vault for when they need to pull equipment from the basement down below. So I previously mentioned that there is a basement, and the basement is planned to be an L shape like this that carries the pool equipment and some other of the utilitarian functions that we're locating down below. And so there's a vault here, and we have an access point for vehicles right here, and that's why we were holding this wall back so that they can lift heating boilers for the hot tubs and the snow melt system out of that vault in the long term if needed. It's just a quick point there in case you're curious what's going on with this corner. Materials for the building, we are using, let's see if I can pull this up here. Here. So we have the River's Edge Terrace structure over that. Sorry, this thing is moving around on me. So great. Apologies. Okay. This is the River's Edge Terrace roof structure. So essentially we're generating a colonnade on both sides of that, flanking the wedge shape of the existing plaza, and having that clad with sandstone. Right now we're looking at doing an adhered sandstone of 2-inch thickness, which is very similar to the sandstone on the porte cochere of the existing building on Garden Street. And then HSS steel tubing, generating an exposed express roof structure with the Kingspan U-Light polycarbonate terrace roof system. It's a prefab product that is basically, it's similar to a standing seam metal roof, but instead of standing seam metal, it's a U-shaped polycarbonate with aluminum mullions, and that will be attached to purlins on the structure here. This is the existing stage that we have on that area. This plan is showing right here this recessed basement, and with a temporary coverage in the interim. If the project is to be phased, it will just be a temporary landscaping feature of turf coverage with a light roofing on top of there. And then we have around this is the first phased utility building that's required, that will have the electrical and the fire risers and the fire sprinkler distribution room. And then this is what we visited on last time with the entrance 11 stair building with the brick, which is the dark masonry that is done around the building. There's entrance 5, and then there's the main entrance, and then there's also portions of the maintenance building and the new pool building that have this dark masonry, and then this would be a true sandstone color. So I'm looking to see, if you don't mind, I'm looking to see where on the website the latest documents. Unless I can pull them up, do you know? I can pull them up on a separate file. I don't want to
10-3.
cross documents that are,
Is it 10-3?
Yeah, it should be that combined submittal material 10-3. Up, 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 up.
okay,
There.
this one? Okay, thank you. Okay. If someone's looking at this, there's.
Yeah, the tree report's like 100 pages.
Yeah, you got a ways to go.
Sorry, okay, I'll go, I'll scroll a little bit faster. Don't waste people's time. Yeah. Okay,
I think the point is there's a lot of trees on site.
zoom out here and see if I can get a better view. Okay, I'm looking for the elevations. I think I'll just pull them up on my files.
It's like 155, page 155 in that doc.
Okay, thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay. So here's a bird's eye view of the landscape design. This is done by the land group. And so you can see here, the River's Edge Terrace, the sandbar. This is the kitchen portion of the sandbar building with an exit stair on the far side. And then this area here is the rooftop seating. We have another exit means of egress through a door right here going down a main feature stair out the main entry. And then this rooftop portion right here is where we're gonna locate the kitchen equipment hoods and RTUs for the space on this. So we're blocking that from the view of the greenbelt with a large wall here, and we will do additional screening along these sides to just limit the view from folks and visitors of the hotel and resort space. This is the chiller on top of entrance 11, tying into the existing building. And then here's another view, more of a clear picture of the pool house and the translucent roof on that. And then we have the hot tub. Then this is a recess ramped down fire pit area, and then a warm pool right here. And then this is a moderate temperature, essentially a normal temperature pool body. And then this is the one also with the swimming lanes going in this direction, and then a basking ledge here, and it tapers down to the deeper portion on this side. And then this is a little bit of a shallower adult pool, and then this is the shallow children's splash pad, semi-submerged with a low depth of water. I believe it's about 6 inches to a foot deep, and we'll have some play elements with splashing water and spraying equipment. And then we have along the perimeter, we have life floor, which is like a rubberized pool deck lining around this perimeter. And you can see that in the light gray here. And then we are taking advantage of this empty space that is currently on the grounds and increasing the lounge area of the pool to basically leverage that space and create and make it more usable with some small turf areas on the pool side of that for some greenery, and then just enhanced pool deck. This is the elevated retaining wall with plantings in it, which will help mask and cover the grade change from the elevated pad for the sandbar building down to the existing pad of the pool deck. So there's a sandstone, essentially a terrace with a retaining wall and a planter bed embedded into it. And then control points to the pool area will be controlled, and they will be gated right here, and then gated right here. And there's 2 points of access in this sort of entry node for the pool area. Go back to 155. I don't know if it's still thinking, but
Did you just hit return there?
yeah, I'm gonna hit the other. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there you go.
Thank you. Okay, so let's scroll real slow. So this is that colonnade element with the sandstone cladding for the RET, River's Edge Terrace. This is the pool house, which is integrally colored concrete and the steel framing system for the roof and the polycarbonate roof material there. This is the edge of this is the greenbelt facing, river facing elevation of the sandbar. So we're indicating a feature point here on the corner with potentially a core 10 metal with signage on that to indicate destination coming from both directions of the greenbelt, either coming from the north or coming from the south. And then we have large floor to ceiling glazing in this facade facing the greenbelt. Our hope is to get transparency and lightness sense of the building from the vantage point of the pool and the pool house through and over to the river, to where you can see the greenery and the activity through the building, and trying to create generally a lightness with the overall facade. This portion right here is essentially wood cladding, board and batten at this time. This is the space where you're transferring right in between the entrance 11, going from this entry node over to the RET. It's a narrow zone. It's approximately 15 feet wide, and it's basically very utilitarian in nature, in that it's a wall covering the kitchen. And we felt like we wanted to put emphasis on the, if I can get there, emphasis onto the entrance 11 building, which is on the other side of that canyon passing through there. So this is the main facade of entrance 11 that has dark masonry with natural stone cladding. And then with that cladding, we're going to play with textures to get a design that is artistic in nature and in corresponding with the Riverside's water theme. And this is still something that is currently this is the vision and the goal, but it's still something that's in the works with the feasibility of this masonry veneer. But essentially it's a sandstone veneer, a cavity drainage system. And with corner glazing with prospect view on the second floor, so you can look out and see the activity in the pool and activity on the rooftop of the sandbar, looking in the southeasterly direction from this vantage point up here. Let's see, this material up here is a Shushugiban, thermally modified Japanese cedar. I mentioned this in our pre-up last time. It's a true authentic Shushugiban. So it's truly thermally modified Japanese cedar, and it's a cladding system that will go on wood framing. And we also have this on the front of the building in the recently finished indoor pool and office building that's along Shinden. And let's see. Again, I don't know if I need to touch more on this portion of the facade of the sandbar, but this is the main entry feature where when you're getting to the building from the main courtyard, exiting the building conference areas and these other variety of exits down here. It will be led down the sidewalk with new fencing along the perimeter, and then being drawn towards this signage feature, which is what's in that this elevation here. So we're using these signage features on both sides of the building. The one that we have on the Greenbelt side is this one right here, and then the one on the courtyard side is this one right here. So let's see if there are. So here's a view of that pool house, and then the sandbar in the distance. We're trying to limit the mass of the building by keeping the open space over on this side and coupling up the second volume, the second 2-story high volume over here that's kind of being hidden by the roof, the gable of this pool house, and then keeping with that transparency through and getting a sense of the vegetation along the greenbelt. And then this is a vantage point looking from the exits of the building, which are this point back here, looking this way towards the sandbar in this direction. And so you can see the openness that we're striving to provide here, and the low height for this with the shading structures, which is fairly necessary for this space in the summertime when it's highly being utilized. And then this is that vantage point along that fence going from the main hotel out towards this central node. Entrance 11 on the left, signage in the middle indicating destination, and then this node basically indicating a direction to go to the left towards the River's Edge Terrace, or over to the Greenbelt to the right, or entering the restaurant right through these doors. Let's see, I don't know if I need to touch on anything else. Okay, so I think that's all I have. I guess I'd open it up for discussion on findings and questions.
Thank you. Any questions? The applicant.
I do have a question. How wide is that expanded width on the Greenbelt now? Proposed?
It is 16 feet.
Oh, that's it, just 16. Okay.
Yes. 1/6, yes.
And how wide is it now?
It fluctuates between 10 and 12 feet.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.
And how does restaurant get supplied?
Yeah, so the restaurant is operated by the hotel. It's an entity of the hotel. And it is supplied by catering services, which are either gets access through the hallway here and through entrance 11 or through the main, which is let me pull up this so basically this is their large kitchen. And so they have the banquet kitchen here, which serves all of their conference spaces and the current events. And then they will supply it either through this pathway system over to the restaurant. But in the
Yep.
case that this is a full functioning restaurant, they will get deliveries through here. And the catering services will be much less than what they currently are, because the current kitchen is partially supplied by goods from the banquet kitchen in terms of cooked goods and food supplies. So they'll have a larger quantity for dry storage, food storage with coolers and those types of things to limit the ongoing transfer of food and services to the restaurant. It will be more like deliveries early in the morning, and trash will be taken through and being taken out of the space and taken to the area over here where they have the facilities for the loading dock that was built in the indoor pool and fitness building. I don't have an aerial view of that, but we have screened areas with dumpsters on both sides of the pool building and a loading dock area that we developed with the last indoor pool and fitness building to screen all that functional use.
Thanks.
If there are no further questions, I'll thank
Nope.
Mr.
Nope.
and turn it over to Ms. Veal.
I will try and keep it short and sweet. I think the applicant did a wonderful job describing all the improvements and changes that the application is proposing. Essentially, the courtyard construction consists of about 14.4% of the overall site area. The overall site area is considered to be the entire parcel of the Riverside Hotel. So it is only a small fraction of the overall site. As such, because of the percentage and how code kind of has these different thresholds of design standards and what needs to be improved and when, essentially, when a improvement or a site application is less than 25% of the overall site, only the improvements need to meet code standards. So the rest of the Riverside Hotel is exempt from code required improvements. And that is how the staff report is analyzed, essentially. So with that being said, there was mention of the 16-foot wide asphalt path, greenbelt pathway being enhanced. In addition to the intersection of the greenbelt and the primary entrance of the proposed redevelopment, it consists of permeable pavers now, which are designed in a circular fashion. And that is acting as the primary entry from the greenbelt to this new site redevelopment. I do not know how wide this area is proposed to be, but I can assume it's at least 16 feet or a little bit wider. That might need some further discussion, as that is the primary interaction between the public realm and this private redevelopment. Staff has also conditioned that the terminus be designed as an effective and inviting entrance and exit to and from the greenbelt. So that's the circular location that I keep referring to. Further discussion may be required as far as the structural orientation and glazing of the proposed wall or fence along this greenbelt area, which acts in a way to raise this new restaurant and the redevelopment out of the floodplain. Staff has also conditioned that the trees proposed along the greenbelt be of high branching class 2 or 3 trees to better shade the greenbelt, its users, as well as the proposed outdoor seating area of the restaurant. And then diving a little bit into code, there was a highlighted section which would be 84C3. This speaks to the design provisions for non-residential structures. The reason why this is highlighted is mostly because while the site doesn't have a direct interaction with a public right-of-way, or at least this improvement area doesn't have interaction with a public right-of-way like West Chinden or North Garden Street, it is directly interacting with the greenbelt, which could be considered that public right-of-way, the public realm. And we want to make sure that that interaction and the relationship dynamic between the proposed restaurant and the new pool facilities, as well as the event center and its landscaping, are all interacting well with one another. The applicant has submitted the tree mitigation plans, and essentially the way staff was able to calculate it was that phase 1 proposed 54 caliper inches to be replaced when 64 caliper inches are being removed. However, in phase 2, so that pool side renovation, with that being completed, it is proposing a sufficient amount of caliper inches. I believe it's 120, 120 inches total to make up for the 64 caliper inches lost. So eventually, between the two phases, there is proper mitigation had on the site. And then one last comment regarding the property signs as identified in the renderings. Staff did not analyze those signs as part of the application. So I'm not sure if they are compliant or not. It's likely that we would require a master sign plan at a later date when you are wanting to install such signs on the site.
Any questions for Ms. Veal?
I do not.
All right, thank you. Are there any members of the public that are here that wish to testify? Right, seeing none, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Hallowell for any rebuttal that you wish to provide.
Yes, thank you. Let's see here. In regards to the master sign plan, we can absolutely provide that. Understanding that signage on buildings is typically something that needs to be permitted separately. We're not anticipating getting approval for signage for that in this round. So we certainly will look forward to having signage submitted for approval later. Right now, we're just designating it as a building element as part of the architecture is the hope. Indicating potential locations for those elements. And then regarding direct interaction with the public, you know, the overall design concept when we first developed this idea was to really talk about and address the interface that the current establishment has with the Greenbelt and find whichever way we can possible to improve upon that. And with that, what we did is we acknowledged that there's a safety issue currently with the width of the green belt and the fence line along this perimeter. And it would be better if I show this in the site map, but there's essentially is a fence line that's pretty harsh, I refer to it as streamlined or just kind of inarticulate, that goes from this point all the way over to this point. And what it does is it gives folks, in our impression, gives folks the urgency to just pass by quickly. And the hotel has had a concern and has experienced people getting injured at this vantage point here, where it's not clearly indicated in its current state that this is a location where people will be transitioning, just because it's sort of a confluence of pathways without a direct delineation of that confluence. So we're hoping to address that by creating the circular element here, and then folks will know that this is a transition zone, be aware of your surroundings and those types of things. But in regards to the quick speed that they experience with people passing by here, our design solution was initially inspired by developing a sawtooth type of features that will create an undulating facade of the fence line. So we're pulling the fence line off of the green belt and then creating zigzags with sandstone fencing, and then creating transparency and places for water to flow in case there is a flood event, water to flow off of the patio in these open metal fence portions here. But the design idea is that this will create moments of interest and also areas of refuge by having the fence pulled off of the green belt and giving people the ability to shuffle away and outside of traffic, or take pause and kind of observe the surroundings with a little higher frequency. So this was essentially the design idea from the beginning. And as well as that interface of the public, we were looking at basically creating the sense of activity or activation by having as much transparency as possible, benefiting the users on the interior, and also creating this activity storefront type of language that will just create good visual communication between the interior activity zone of the restaurant, the activated zone of the outdoor patio, and then a slight buffering and in terms of safety and for softness of those two up against the green belt, as well as the green belt being widened from its current state of roughly 10 to 12 feet. So we kind of feel like we're solving some of those issues, or we're working towards solving some of those issues with that interface. We do absolutely agree it is an interface that is very well worth making as great as we can make it, just because of the nature of the whole setting. This one over here is more of like an area where folks can exit, is how we're looking at it. It's not a primary entrance, so it's more of a spill out of pedestrians from the it's an access point to the greenbelt from hotel users who are acquainted with the facility. It's not meant to be inviting, or it's not meant to draw people in, as we're pushing to have folks come from this central node over here and work their way towards this other secondary node in the center of the courtyard. And then so that addresses the interface with the greenbelt, that facade that maybe we call it like street frontage for this discussion, and then also the terminus at the intersection here with the paving system.
So Mr. Hallowell, I do have a question on where the width of the green belt's being added, if it's Riverside or Riverside Hotel side. All right, Mr. Connor.
we'll bring up the landscape and civil engineer.
Sean Connor, the Land Group, 462 East Shore Drive, Eagle, Idaho. I'm a landscape architect and civil engineering firm representative of them for this project. How we would suggest that would work is do a 16-foot green belt section through there. And then the attachment for the node or the circulation that would expand beyond that would just be the Riverside's hardscape that would be attached to it. But the actual easement would be written for the 16-foot pathway that would continue through.
Thank you. And the reason I'm asking, because if you expand towards the river, then it'll trigger the riparian zone, which would be a conditional use and the vegetation requirements. Whereas if you go landward to pick up that additional width, it would not.
Okay.
And so that's the reasoning for that question. And then the other, I know it's really interesting with how the property line runs right now. And so I would suggest in that previously looking at this property, Idaho Department of Land said it's a little bit different than traditional because accretion's going the opposite way. But this is a very old piece of property dating back to the hay reserve and perhaps prior to statehood. And so property ownership might be a little bit tricky, and I would definitely engage Idaho Department of Lands as you move forward.
Yes, thank you for the information on the wayward versus outward for the CUP trigger. Regarding IDL, our Department of Lands, that was resolved this last year, I believe, and we can provide documentation for that. IDL came out there and identified and set their new property boundaries, and that's been resolved with IDL. That deed and plat was completed in 2021. And so the 6500 CFS line, which justified the building setback here, is shown on this plan as set by IDL and the new pins recorded by the Ada County.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And that setback line is this dash line right where the cursor is in this view.
And that's the 70-foot.
Yes. Goes right along here.
And
you said correct when she asked 70?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that's
okay. And then I appreciate the signs, and I do agree with Ms. Veal, just looking at the placement and the sign district and the lack of entrance on all of the locations, that in order for those signs to be permitted, you would need to go through a master sign plan or some other option for those signs to be allowed in the future. And then one thing to note, Garden City Code 1013 does prohibit vehicles on the green belt. And then you had, I don't remember what you called it, but it's not a mechanical room, but it's a utilitarian
Yeah.
room that you noted the vehicles would need to get in and out of. And so how would you address that with the prohibition of driving on the green belt?
So that would be the occurrence of that. We're actually planning for that to not have to happen until like 25 years from now when the boiler needs to be replaced. So it's not a part of any of the operations of the facility at all. It's just in case the large equipment located in the basement needs to be plucked out of the basement, and it will be like a hoist and then taken off and replaced. And so it's merely just a maintenance type thing that we don't foresee happening in our lifetime. Yeah. And they would, yeah. So we perceive them needing to get a permit.
Thank you. All right. Any more questions for the applicant? And I think we can
Nope.
close the public hearing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
And turn it over to the committee.
So to be clear, this is the pre-app where we just reviewed the stair tower and mechanical tower. And since then, the restaurant has come into the application. And as such, the staff report does not reflect all of the restaurant code review. Is that correct?
Staff was able to include the restaurant review in
Okay.
the staff report.
Okay. But this is a continuation of the pre-app that was just the stair tower, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, at the pre-application, it was just the event location, the elevator, the utility.
Yeah.
But then it was discussed having the
Right.
ordinance too.
Right.
the Committee's request, so staff felt it was appropriate to be able to combine them. for
Just
this.
combine it. Yep. Okay.
I think it really helps seeing the whole picture of where this, the
Yeah.
master plan of where it's going.
Yeah. And I think, architecturally, there's a lot going on. It's a busy site with a lot of different program requirements and whatnot. There's nothing that jumps out at me architectural wise as far as the restaurant's concerned, or, the stair tower, which is now kind of buried back within the restaurant program. The street front is the green belt. So that's our biggest concern, how the property interacts with itself internally is less of a concern, and also triggers less kind of code requirements that we review. So I'm obviously looking more heavily at the green belt and that interaction with the public. I think that my biggest concern is how a new wider green belt is interacting for the multiple users that use it, right? There's the strollers that are coming and going to check out the restaurant. And then there's there's runners, and then there's commuters, and they all kind of use the green belt in different ways. So what does widening it do? And in widening it, do we need to have more of those kind of respite safety zones for the people that are just strolling? Because I think, it's like a street. When the street gets wider, the traffic goes faster, right? So in widening it, yeah, there's more room for more people, but are those people that are going from point A to point B only going to be going faster? And maybe then the strollers and the dog walkers and the people that are chatting with their friends that are up on the balcony from the green belt that they haven't seen, are they going to, cause a congestion? So I might be suggesting some more kind of intentional areas of a place to step off the green belt and, kind of get out of the way. And maybe that's within this whole 16-foot, we've widened it 4 feet or 6 feet. Maybe part of that widening is some of these intentional little kind of exits, rather than just having an entire 16-foot wide path the whole way.
Yeah, that was part of the reason for my questioning on what the width was, and just get an understanding of really why. I mean, it widening that green belt now gives it, it's less intimate. It may be more make people feel more like, I got a lot of space now, I can really
Right.
Speed up and zip through there, and now I've jumped onto the freeway, versus what is typical of the greenbelt widths, and maybe if it's just so there's a potential of maybe getting a vehicle over there at one point in the next some odd years, that there is that vehicle access. Maybe, you know, the widened section, you know, can be with a grass pave or something that can be conducive to vehicular traffic, but still kind of maintain that. I think that pulling the building back, creating that zone before the sawtooth edge, and you know, maybe it's all landscaping now, but maybe some of that is grassy area or something abutting the greenbelt to be able to step off. And I don't know, I would echo the concern with, okay, does it need to be widened that wide all the way down there? Is there a need for, I think there was a mention of fire emergency access. And that's why I was, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, this is like 26 feet wide, something, you know, in order to really get some vehicles back there. But so that may be something that the applicant needs to address. I like what, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, likewise, I think that building architecture engagement with that public realm of the green belt, I think that the applicants did a good job on that. I really don't have any issues with that design aesthetic or material choices. I was thinking that maybe there's an opportunity there, that circular node, and where all those paths come together, that maybe there's some kind of an element there that visually get more than just a surface paving change that might be explored, if there could be, whether it's an artistic element, a signage feature, I mean, something. I don't know, but there just might be an opportunity.
Right.
there
Yeah,
at
I
that
mean,
location.
it's kind of it's maybe a holdover from what's there now. It's the back of a stage, right? So maybe the back of that stage can be more engaging and kind of more of a feature element that is, you know, a signature of the sandbar, right? It's like a unique sculpture. It's a unique shape. It's something at the end of that stage there where it meets the circle.
So, yeah, I mean, other than that, I didn't really have anything in addition to staff's recommended conditions.
Yeah, me neither.
Are those something that you feel comfortable conditioning, or would you like to see that come back?
No, I think it can be conditioned. I just, maybe can we hear from the applicant on the width of that green belt, and you know, is it required to, is it necessary to have that be all asphalt? Just
So Josh
respond.
Herschel with Cushing Terrell, and we've talked with the owner of Riverside. They'd be willing to even do some sections that are permeable paver to help break up some of that. There is a width wise we need for fire access, but we don't need the full 16 feet paved. So we could do different material types on part of it if we needed to help slow traffic down, so that this is more of a walking path. They're willing to stripe it even if you needed. This is for bike striping. This is for walking, different types of stuff. I think we could work the nodes into the fence pretty well as easily too, just for areas to pull over and stop. Yeah. I do want to say the circular will help, and we could look at options. The other big congestion that occurs right here right now is that's where the main entrance is to the sandbar, where now we're pushing it all the way in past the pool. So you have to walk around to get into the sandbar. So it's going to help that congestion of a lot of people
yes, they're going to gather there when they come out of the restaurant, but when they're entering, it's kind of pushing them further back in. So you have a longer area for people to congregate before they actually get to the restaurant entrance than currently shown. But yeah, we'd be more than willing to work with staff on different paving options, you know, what we could do to mitigate that. And that's Riverside's ultimate goal, is to try to slow traffic down in there. And that's a hard one.
I might note, for the benefit of the committee members, the city does get a fair amount of complaints about the inlay right there, because people feel unsteady, their bike tires get caught and whatnot. So if pavers are the choice, I would recommend being very careful and thoughtful so they don't become a hazard for users. And I might also note that recently the city went through a ULI planning advisory process, and they had noted really looking at the Greenbelt as like a regional park, so looking at both sides. So I might suggest, instead of just pulling off areas to pull off, that they're created as like places to be, and kind of like that park-like setting, versus just oh, the bike's coming really quickly, I need to step off the path, or, you know, so that might be suggestions to throw out there.
Yeah, at one point we did look at like sandstone seating areas and other stuff, and some of those, you know, I know we're probably using part of that for mitigation, but we can look at other options with staff if the commission's good with that.
Yeah, and Jenna, does code speak to the material of the greenbelt? Because I know a lot of the new applications and approvals, it's at least concrete, and if not, some sort of paver.
I was under the understanding that concrete was used for the fire access, because fire would require like fire rated material, and that's why we get the concrete. Otherwise, new improvements I've seen put down that aren't fire related can still be asphalt.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head. I'm not saying that it's not there.
Yeah.
I do know that the city is actively working towards concrete replacement just because of the lifespan.
Right. And that's what I was hoping for, is that there was something that did require it rather than it's optional. Because, you know, a concrete and or pavers is gonna have more longevity for sure. And it's smoother to bike on, it's smoother to walk on, etc.
Stay smoother longer.
Yeah. So as far as conditions, how do we do that as far as width? Because I think we're both looking for less width overall, or maybe it's perceived width, right? With some sort of alternative material on the sides that can still meet their fire width of 16.
I like the idea of perceived width.
Yeah,
Right.
I would, exactly, you know, visually still narrowing that up to where it makes people move slower. From kind of a visually perceived width is to be utilized by bikes and
that's permeable pavers or grasscrete or.
yeah, I think that, you know, the applicant can work with staff and come up with some ideas on how to achieve that.
And then do we say or specify, you know, some sort of node, or a node on each side, or 2 nodes on one side, or something, as far as kind of like little slow down, step out of the way areas? It seems like there's opportunity maybe behind the main stage, the big stage, or in the sawtooth areas.
Yeah, I think maybe just incorporating some more opportunities to, again, like Jenna suggested, almost like not just step off and get out of the way, but spots to enjoy, whether that's the seating area with some benches or whatnot,
Right,
or
right.
breakout space off the green belt, so to speak. And I think that also, in my mind, without knowing statistics, makes people get, slow down a little bit. There's
Right,
people
right.
hanging out there on the side, enjoying themselves. And so I don't know, Hannah, Jenna, do you think that you can craft that into a condition?
We think we can.
Okay. Then let's add that one in there.
All right, is that a,
And then I would move to approve with the recommended conditions and the added condition that we just discussed.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And
Yeah, thanks. It was a good application. It's a big application that didn't come back and forth 15 times. So nice work.
Yep.
And then I do apologize. I spoke too soon, so I apologize to the next applicant. There is a discussion item regarding modifications to design review fiscal year 2020, number 14, to reduce glazing, and whether or not it's within the parameters of the original approval.
Jenna, Bill's on. I couldn't stay. I had another conflict, but I am on.
Okay.
Well, welcome back.
So what are we actually, deleting here?
So the request is to change from 5060 windows to a 5050.
So we're not eliminating windows, we're just adjusting the size.
Yes, supply chain. They're really big, and the visual from ground floor, from the street level, that you won't ever notice. I mean, they're big, they're very marketable, but we've got a supply chain issue, and it was triggered by a code problem. We tried to move the windows up, but we can't because of the headers pushed up to the bottom of the plate, so we just can't go any higher.
Okay.
Was there any triggers from staff on percent glazing that was an issue? Is that why it's before us, or is it just because it was an impact?
Yeah, so the reason why it's in front of you is because it is a reduction in glazing percentages.
Okay.
I don't know that number off the top of my head.
It didn't go to non-code compliant. It was just a reduction.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And I think, I mean, if we saw this with 5050s,
I think it would have been
originally,
fine aesthetically.
yeah, we wouldn't have said, well, what if they're 5060s? So I think this is fine.
Great,
I would agree.
perfect.
Thanks for coming back, Bill.
Wow, geez, I won't contest that.
Okay, no rebuttal.
All right. Well, yeah, no rebuttal. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you. And then if you have time and are willing, we can do this at a later date as well. But the process moving forward and some of the details, I don't know if you want to talk through that now, and just the flow of when to provide comments. we can certainly address that as we move forward as well.
I don't know, I think the little bit of discussion we had back and forth via email kind of clarified for me, and just the initial getting, at least having a couple of weeks to look at it concurrently when Hannah's doing her report, and then providing those comments, and then that can all be discussed in the meeting with the applicant, and then any final comments can be provided after that. And I think I see that's, or during that session, additional comments can be provided, and then a final review following the meeting, if we need to amend any of our. That's kind of the way I understood it, at least moving forward for initially, to see how that works.
Yeah, I think let's just roll with how we've kind of discussed, and then if there's something we can smooth out timeline wise or presentation wise, or getting all of our submittals to look the same, whatever, you know what I mean? We can kind of work that as we go along.
Great. Well, thank you. And I'll always thank you for all of your work. You do a lot of heavy lifting.
So now, when will we have our first applicant meeting with the ones that you already sent out? Is that scheduled yet, or do we know? Or
I have not scheduled them yet. We do have 2 in, as you know. I was going to try and schedule them for November 7th, but given we now have like 5 other applications on that agenda, it might not be until the end of November.
Now, do you guys does that need to be, it's not a hearing, so it doesn't need to be publicly noticed, or?
Right.
So realistically, I mean, we could have it separate. I mean, definitely if we go long on these meetings, it's kind of tough to add that on the backside.
Yeah, in my mind, I was assuming we were keeping the every first and third Mondays, just for sake of habit right now.
Or at least while we still have those that are processed through the kind of quasi judicial process. It may be easier not to try to have multiple different meetings, but if that works out and it's preferable.
And then they would be at the end. It would be a discussion item in essence.
Yeah, it'd be at the end of the hearings. We would turn off the recordings and everything, and it just turn into a Zoom meeting.
I guess as long as the hearings aren't like today, when we're, what is it, almost 7 o'clock, it'd be tough to add that one onto the tail end.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's having at least 2 hearings and then at least 1 Zoom meeting, conference, consultation a month.
And those we won't know until we get into them, whether, they could potentially, having all of the comments for the applicant to look at, they could be a quicker process at the time we're actually doing the meeting.
I think the meetings will go quicker because we won't have the formalities of, so hopefully we can shave off some time just in the formalities.
And we don't need a, 35-minute presentation. It can be a, hey, have you guys seen this? And we're like, yeah, we saw it. Let's talk about our comments and get right into that. And when do you want the 2 that you've sent us? I see that Brett's done them and I'm in process. When do you want that? By the end of the day?
Deadline. I don't even know what my deadline is yet.
I thought they were for the tail end of this meeting, so I figured I was behind.
Oh.
I had no idea.
Well, so like I said, I was going to try and schedule them for November 7th after the public hearing, but given that we now have, I think 5, if my math is right, formal hearing applications, most of which are actually subdivisions, I don't think we're gonna have time realistically to tack anything
that.
else. onto
Okay.
the Agenda. So we could do it before the 21st, or we could do it during the 21st. After, but there's also a few other design review applications that have come in as a formal hearing because they were previously pre-app that I
Oh,
also
sure.
scheduled.
And in your communication with these applicants, it's not a public hearing, so you can just email the applicants and say, we're going to have a Zoom call on the 3rd of November at noon, and
Yep.
then they all show up, right?
Yeah, I'll send them an acceptance letter that we've formally accepted their application. We're not looking for additional material as of right now. We'll start processing and reviewing your application, but it doesn't come with a predetermined date like it has. in
Got
the
it.
acceptance
Got
letter
it.
Up until this point. So it could be, a week out. Here's your staff report. I've scheduled a meeting for this date. Please let me know if it works for you or something along those lines.
Okay.
But in saying that, I think if you guys as consultants and I don't know, are you going to be showing up, Jenna?
I like this process. I would like to keep showing
Yeah,
up.
okay. So I think having predetermined dates to be able to select from would
Right.
be very beneficial, at least for me, knowing, okay, I'm gonna have X amount of staff reports by this date. You guys can set aside a certain amount of time for meetings consistently on these dates, or similar to like what we're doing now. And maybe it is just once a week, we have an hour set aside for an application that needs
Yeah.
comments. Or
Well, it makes sense to keep rolling on the habitual Mondays as we kind of get closer to having just this sort of format, but tack them on to the end as we move forward.
Mhm.
Seems reasonable.
Yep, oh, that sounds good.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I will do that.
Well, thank you.
Oh,
I made you stay for an extra.
Christmas time hearings.
Oh,
do
yeah.
Since we're looking into hearing dates that far now, we have potentially a meeting on the 19th, it looks like. That's that third Monday. I'm trying to figure out if we'll have quorum for hearings, and I'm
I'll be around.
the 19th being a hearing instead of a consultation, or maybe both, but
I'll be around the 19th, but I will not be around January 16th.
And let me see, yeah, I'm good on the 16th, but I guess that doesn't matter. Unless we want to move that one to some other time.
But you're here the 19th, Brad?
Uh,
December?
yeah,
Let me
December
see.
19th.
19th, yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah. And the 16th, if we still need it, we can figure out then. but I'd be pushing it out till like Thursday or Friday or the following week.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, let me see. Just looking at that. I'm out on the 23rd, that entire week.
Okay.
So
Okay, so it'd have to be,
it'd have to be later that week. But I'm leaving like on the 20th or 19th.
Yeah, that won't work.
So
We just miss one.
yeah, or we could just, I mean, we could always just miss one. If we decide to do the 19th, I mean, that's kind of Christmas week, so we could just
Yeah.
consider the end of January Christmas.
okay.
But yeah, I wanted to get an understanding as to the schedule, so we don't have to set anything in stone right now. But thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
All right, all right. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Have a nice couple of weeks. Thank you.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
Good night.